This guy sat at the very top, one of the 7 strongest alive. He burned a whole war to avenge his murdered family. Then his enemies trapped him and an axe split his skull. The knight who killed him was the lost heir of his own house. But the second he died, time threw him 13 years back. He wakes up young again, in the body he had before the fall. Back before he lost his family and everything else. He lands on the exact day orcs wipe out his whole squad. This time he drives his blade straight up into the beast. One swing takes the giant orc's arm clean off. He carves through the rest before they land a hit. Then he saves the commander who was meant to die here, and he holds out his hand, ready to take command and rebuild it all. Ghislain offers Skoven, the veteran commander, his hand and asks for command of the troops. Skoven stares, and soldiers scoff that a fool begs for command while lives hang on the line. Skoven looks away and flatly refuses, and Ghislain snaps back, stunned. The commander stalks off, snapping that not even the young master can seize his lord's authority. Ghislain grinds his teeth, but he gets it. He would brush off a kid asking for command too. Then a giant red orc roars and charges straight at them. Skoven leaps in with his sword and tells Ghislain to fall back, since the boy is too green. Ghislain glances over his shoulder, lifts his blade, and mutters that he has no choice. He blows past Skoven in a flash of light, and the commander flinches with a grunt. Skoven whirls around, shocked, and demands to know what Ghislain is doing. The old commander's sweaty face locks up as he watches the boy move. His eyes blow wide, and all he manages is a confused huh. A heavy sword drives down into the giant orc's skull, its red eyes bulging. Ghislain launches himself up at the towering monster. The blade splits deep into the orc's face, and dark blood sprays. The giant orc drops dead with the sword in its head, and both men stand over it. Skoven gapes, unable to grasp how the boy found that weak spot so fast. Ghislain looks him in the eye and asks Skoven the most important thing in battle. Behind them, the soldiers cower under their shields as more orcs roar closer. Ghislain says a scared army wins nothing, and they need momentum now. He grins, dives in, and drops another orc while Skoven cuts one beside him. Ghislain hurls himself into the orc pack, carving through several at once. He rams the blade through a charging orc's head while the spearmen stare. Skoven's jaw drops, his gray mustache twitching in disbelief. Ghislain raises his blood-soaked sword and taunts the orcs to come at him. Covered in blood, he lifts the blade high and screams he will kill them all. Ghislain sinks low as a ring of huge orcs closes in around him. He tears through them, slashing 3 orcs open before they land a hit. Skoven lifts a severed orc head, dazed, wondering if he is dreaming. Ghislain clashes with another. Skoven can barely fight these with mana, yet this skinny kid wrecks them all. The boy looks tired and bloodied, and Skoven can tell he is running low, but something shifts. Ghislain slips an orc's heavy swing with the tiniest shift of his body. Then he crouches and drives his glowing blade into the beast's weak spot. In the dark, Skoven thinks the boy fights like a mana-less swordmaster, or maybe something even greater than that. Blood on his face, Ghislain screams and asks the orcs if that is all they have. He yells that he is not even warmed up, and these warriors are a letdown. The orcs all turn on Ghislain, and a soldier gasps that they chase the young master. Another soldier calls for the commander as Skoven leaves the shield line. Skoven watches him run and wonders what the boy is thinking. Ghislain lifts his sword among the orcs. Baiting them and pulling their focus was smart, but he runs for the town's edge, and Skoven realizes it drops off a cliff. Skoven's eyes narrow as it starts to click. A cliff. The commander goes dead silent as the plan lands on him. From above, Skoven drops back and roars for the troops to raise a shield wall. His face hardens and mana rises off him as he chooses to follow the first sun. A giant orc throws itself down at Ghislain as he darts along the ground. Bloodied, blade up, Ghislain trusts Skoven gets the plan. He would rather cut them all down himself, but his garbage stamina in this young body cannot take it. Even so, he grins and decides this is enough for Skoven to finish. 3 orcs come barreling down the slope on a trail of blue light. 2 of them jerk back at the last second as they see what waits ahead. A gauntleted fist tightens on a blade as pale mana curls around it. Ghislain's bloody face breaks into a wide grin. Perfect! He throws himself off the cliff while 3 orcs teeter at the brink. He lands lower down, arms wide and sword ready, and gives the signal. Skoven throws his head back and bellows to his troops. The spear wall slams forward and he orders them to push the orcs off the cliff. The soldiers crash in, driving the orcs back toward the open air. One orc howls as a soldier braces behind his shield and shoves. The orcs lose their footing and tumble off the edge. Axes flying. They plunge down the rock face one after another. A falling orc's tusked face fills the frame, red eyes wide. They smash into the ground far below in a burst of dust and blood. The soldiers heave for breath, stunned they killed every last orc. Scoven leans over the edge, reaching down and yelling for the young master. Ghislain's bloody hand jams his sword into the rock as he dangles off the wall. His blood-flecked face still manages a tired grin. Up top, Scoven's whole face drains white with panic. The commander's mouth tightens as he scrambles for a way to reach him. Scoven stretches his arm down and tells Ghislain to grab his hand. Ghislain's fingers slip on the blade and he admits he cannot reach. Scoven pushes further and tells him to hold on a little longer. The commander's eyes fly wide and the soldiers freeze as he screams for the young master. In the dark, a pale-haired girl bows her head, tears falling, and calls him Ghislain Appa. Ghislain's dazed face floats in the violet black as he whispers her name, Elena. A shard of memory shows little Elena hugging him and asking if their mom is gone. In another shard, she smiles through tears and thanks her Appa. Then she is older and furious, shouting to ask what is wrong with him lately. She drops her head and tells him he is the worst. Ghislain stands alone in the void, staring at his empty hand. Tears run down his face as he says these are all his memories of Elena. He holds a glowing shard, then a small hand grabs his sleeve and he spins. Little Elena clings to his arm, crying, and begs him to go with her. Ghislain's eyes snap open. He lies in bed with a damp towel on his forehead. The quiet room stretches around him as he lies under the blankets. He lifts a shaky hand to his face and realizes he is alive. He sits up slowly, hand over his eyes, wondering if that was a dream. Pain slams through his skull and he lets out a sharp grunt. Ghislain hunches over, sweating, his whole body screaming from the strain. At least it proves he is alive. A figure steps into the doorway and calls him young master as he sits up. A maid with white and red hair and red eyes lights up and says he is awake. Ghislain stares at her, stunned, and breathes out her name, Belinda. Belinda leans on the table, scolding him for scaring her and fighting the orcs himself. Ghislain suddenly pulls her into a hug, and she freezes, face going red. Flustered, she asks what he is doing. He just says he is glad to see her. Belinda was his tutor since he was little, the only one who stuck by him. But after the family fell to ruin, she went missing, and he never saw her again. Holding her now, Ghislain says he never thought he would see her like this. Belinda asks why he is so happy when they meet every day. He knows he must tell the truth. He grips her shoulders and warns a catastrophe will soon hit Perdium. Belinda asks what he means. Ghislain's mouth opens as he starts to say it. The truth is, he died and came back to life. Belinda just waves it off with a yeah, sure. She figures the orcs rattled him, but he insists he, not Perdium, is in real danger. She keeps nagging about the scenes he causes and Ghislain sees she does not believe him. This will not work. The two face off and Belinda asks what he would do if he were too hurt for the festival. Ghislain's eye snaps up. Festival? Belinda smiles and asks if he forgot since Lady Elena has been waiting to go with him. A framed photo shows Ghislain holding Elena, and it hits him. A festival came every year around now. He picks up the photo and murmurs a quiet yeah. Back in his old life, he never once got to enjoy a festival, after all he lived through. Ghislain asks Belinda how long there is until the festival. She says next week, about a week left. He repeats it as a tear falls. This was the day that changed his life. A little girl's dress and shoes appear at his door, and her voice asks if her Appa is inside. Ghislain's haunted face says it is the memory that still will not leave him. Little Elena grabs his hand, crying, and begs him to please go with her. The scene cuts to Elena at that door, and the weight lands. 1 week later, Elena will die. A pair of boots pads across the manor's grand tiled floor at home. Belinda freezes with her cheeks red, totally caught off guard. Elena presses against Ghislain's back, her face flushing bright red. Ghislain lowers his eyes and lets a small, warm smile slip out. Then Elena shoves him back hard and yells that he's creeping her out. Ghislain doubles over coughing, floored that a kid's shove wrecked him. Elena crosses her arms, eyes wet, pouting at him in pure annoyance. She snaps that he forgot everything after making such a big fuss. Ghislain just grins back at her, sly and way too pleased with himself. Belinda and Elena both flinch, totally weirded out by the new hymn. The two of them slink off, leaving Ghislain sputtering on his own. Ghislain clutches his chest, frustration boiling over his face. He sinks to his knees, shaking, and Elena stands over him, unimpressed. Ghislain kneels there worn out, but a soft smile creeps onto his face. He can't help clinging. In his last life, he watched them all die. Ghislain grimaces and rubs his sore chest, still catching his breath. Belinda stands there sulking, arms tucked, clearly done with his antics. A house knight walks up as Elena hurries over, waving a hand to explain. Back in his room, Ghislain stands hands in pockets while she studies him. Elena peeks over her shoulder, cheeks pink, clearly weirded out by him. Belinda pulls Elena close and asks if he went and hit his head. Out in town, a busy market sprawls under the tents, packed and loud. Servants huddle and whisper, half the staff spooked by the young master. Ghislain hauls Elena around the market while she shoves at his face. She stretches his cheek out and the passing servants gawk and murmur. The family castle looms dark against a bruised purple sky. A huge armored figure strides in, and the two siblings freeze in surprise. Ghislain tenses as a heavy hand clamps onto his face. The old knight hunches over, white mustache trembling, panting for air. He grabs Ghislain by the shoulder, grinning wide with tears welling up. Elena beams beside them while the old knight fusses over Ghislain. Ghislain clicks his tongue while the old man musses his hair and grins. The two of them square off, the old knight grinning, Ghislain scowling. Ghislain answers him flat, his expression giving nothing away. The old knight's eyes blow wide, stunned by whatever the boy just said. The pale stone tower of the estate rises into the misty morning. Inside, Ghislain's eyes go sharp as he takes in the great hall. He crosses the vast hall with the knight, past a circle carved in the floor. They move through the armory, footsteps echoing off the weapon racks. A spiked mace and rows of shields line the cold armory wall. The old knight turns grave, his voice dropping low and serious. Ghislain's eye widens as the knight lays out what really went down. Ghislain goes quiet, then murmurs, "So that's what happened here." The old knight claps him on the back, proud and pleased. A sly grin spreads over Ghislain's face as a plan clicks together. Ghislain strolls off smirking while the old knight bows low behind him. He glances back once at the knight beneath the family crest on the wall. The people he loves flash through his mind, every one of them smiling. Ghislain stands alone, turned away, hands sunk deep in his pockets. A memory surfaces of a stately figure facing the old family crest. Then the Mercenary King's torn wolf banner burns over a field of dead. His old face flickers back, hollow and worn from a lifetime of war. Ghislain's eyes snap cold, the killer behind them wide awake now. He drops cross-legged in the middle of the empty hall to train. He grits his teeth, sweat beading as he reaches deep inside. Faint blue wisps of mana start to drift up around his body. In his mind, he sits the same way atop a mountain of fallen knights. Blue sparks crackle across his fingers as the power answers him. Mana wraps his whole body, and a tiny core flickers between his hands. His face twists with strain, teeth clenched against the pressure. In memory, an armored hand lifts a battered, glowing red tome. Blue fire roars off him as a bright core swells in his cupped palms. He forces it wider, muttering that he can shape a second core. He throws his head back and screams as two cores blaze at once. Blood bursts from his mouth, his frail body buckling under the load. Ghislain crumples coughing, gasping that he once reached 5 of them. Each core adds a burst of power, but it drinks a brutal amount of mana. Back then, the Mercenary King stood alone against a wall of shields. Ghislain wipes the blood from his jaw and steadies his breathing. He pushes to his feet and swears he'll take Idun's head this time. And he means the shadows lurking behind House Delphine too. Everyone who helped burn his county down goes on that list. Back in the present, Elena flicks his forehead and he barely reacts. Elena skips ahead, giggling, while Ghislain trudges behind, wiped out. For a second, her smile softens, quiet and genuinely happy. Ghislain watches her out of the corner of his eye, saying nothing. He studies his little sister up close, memorizing the moment. Nearby, Belinda warns 2 house knights about the crowd of festival visitors. In his head, the plan spreads out across a web of glowing chessboards. Ghislain lifts a single black chess piece, eyes cool and certain. His hand slips toward the small pouch hanging at his belt. At a bread stall, Elena grins with a baguette while the baker waves them off. Elena grabs his hand and tugs him along, yawning as the sky darkens. The manor's towers cut into a deep, star-scattered night sky. On the steps, Elena crouches down, chin in her hands, worn out. Ghislain looks down at her, a heavy thought turning behind his eyes. His gaze sharpens, cold and wary as the quiet knight presses in. A house knight in blue armor holds out a gauntlet to help Elena up. Elena laughs and takes his hand, and Ghislain's eyes lock onto them. Ghislain's stare goes ice cold, fixed hard on the 2 knights. They grin down at his little sister, and he doesn't trust that grin one bit. Elena grins up on the shoulders of her two escort knights, Jamal and Philip. Ghislain fixes a cold stare on the pair, already knowing who they truly are. In his last life, these two played the loyal family, then betrayed the whole house. Elena bounces ahead, cheering that they made it, down a dark, empty street. The road opens into a dead square packed with stacked crates and old barrels. Elena scrunches her face and asks what this dump is. Sure, no show happens here. Jamal sweats and swears the crowd isn't ready, promising people arrive soon. Ghislain drops his gaze, already certain this whole square is a trap. To anyone else, the road looks like a plain, forgotten back alley, but the stacked crates seal off every road out of the square on purpose. Ghislain clocks the ambush at once, as Elena grabs his arm to haul him off. Elena shouts she won't sit through a show in a filthy hole like this. She strains to drag him and asks since when her brother got this heavy. A heavy blue gauntlet clamps onto Elena's shoulder and stops her cold. Philip leans in with a stiff grin and tells her to wait a little longer. Elena freezes, sweat down her cheek, and stammers out Philip's name. Both knights loom closer now, and Elena backs off, saying they act strange. Jamal scratches his neck and plays it off, claiming he never meant to spook her. Then he grins and admits a very reasonable request came their way. Elena's eyes blow open and she repeats that word back, a request in disbelief. The two knights close in and every trace of warmth drains from their faces. Above the rooftops, the sky hangs dark over the trap they walked into. A tall man in a wide hat strolls up with two hooded killers and praises their work. Jamal bows and says the young lady is delivered, so they should settle the deal. The hatted man tilts his head under the brim and lets out a low, curious hum. His gaze lands on Ghislain, whom he never ordered them to bring along. Jamal offers to toss the boy in for free, a fool who walked to his own grave. Ghislain answers flat, names Jamal, and asks if he really walks away from this. Jamal laughs and says worry about yourself since they plan to vanish far away. He waves at the starving county, done with the hunger and the barbarian raids. Jamal throws his arms wide, sure others are already fleeing Perdium too. Ghislain blurs forward and opens a deep red line across Jamal's chest. Jamal blinks down, his mouth half open, and chokes out one confused huh. Blood spills from his lips while Elena flinches back with a sharp gasp. Even Frank jerks upright as a shocked question mark flashes over the square. Ghislain rises over the falling knight and thinks of comrades who stayed loyal. His face turns, one eye burning cold blue, and he mutters that they never did. Philip snatches Elena as a shield, hissing no knight loses to an amateur. Ghislain's sword leaves his hand and spins across the square in a silver arc. The blade buries in Philip's forehead as he chokes that this is impossible. Ghislain pulls the fainting Elena close. Two traitor knights dead at his feet. The hooded killers trade a look, doubting this soft air dropped both knights. Frank decides the eyes don't lie since the boy cut them down in a blink. Both fell to strikes wrapped in raw mana, a power this heir should never hold. Elena clings to his arm, tears pouring, begging her brother to explain this. Ghislain says nothing, his profile hard as he turns his eyes away from her. He reaches back and steadies her wet face, and she sobs his name once more. Ghislain lays her limp body down to rest while Frank thanks him for the work. His face swings toward Frank, blue eyes flat and stripped of any warmth. Frank admits the heir beats the rumors since they meant to kill those two. He draws on his pipe and asks if the boy has hidden his real skill all along. Ghislain flicks the blood off his blade and asks why that matters to Frank. He glances back over his shoulder and counts the enemies left, 3 tonight. The two hooded ones are nothing, but the middleman leaks mana on another level. Ghislain sinks low as blue fire coils up his arms, set on ending this fast. Frank asks whose order this was, and Ghislain asks why a dead man needs to know. His mouth barely moves as he says he never counted on an easy answer. Ghislain lifts his sword beside his cheek while Frank swears he will talk soon. A killer asks if they should take the head, and Frank flatly tells him no. Frank orders them to break every limb since the shape needs pain to form. Both killers lunge with a sharp yes, their blades swinging for Ghislain. Ghislain narrows his eyes as the first blade comes screaming down. He slips between them in a blink, and one recoils, certain a firecracker blew. The masked man hauls his mana-charged blade down at Ghislain's skull. Ghislain rams the heavy pommel dead into the killer's forehead with a crack. Then he drives the edge up through the man's head as blood bursts out. One killer drops while the second springs in, calling it a shallow trick. Ghislain snaps his sword up and catches the diving dagger in a shower of sparks. His silver hair whips as one cold eye tracks every twitch of the killer's hands. He hammers an elbow into the man's guard and cracks the whole stance open. Then his blade rips across the killer's chest and flings him off his feet. Ghislain sweeps low and finishes the second killer in a spray of blood and light. He straightens up, silver bangs over one cold eye, his breath steady again. Then a white blade slices down from behind as Frank finally makes his move. Ghislain twists and catches the sword behind his own back without facing it. Frank sweats. Stunned, the boy blocked a flawless sneak strike from behind. Ghislain spins on his heel and whips his sword straight back at the hitman. Steel screams as the two blades clash and Frank drives in again. Ghislain's edge splits Frank's cheek and the pipe tumbles from his mouth. The little pipe drops and shatters against the cold stones of the square. Ghislain grits his teeth, one blue eye blazing, and carves at Frank's throat. Frank reels back with a raw slash torn across him and a jolt of shock. He gasps that a hair less mana and Ghislain would have taken his head. Their swords lock and Frank can't grasp how the boy lived through a neck cut. Frank realizes the air-packed mana into his own throat, floored by the skill. Blood runs down his neck as Frank bares his teeth and swears Ghislain dies here. Frank says a weaker mana shield and Ghislain's strike would have taken his head. Frank sneers that feeble mana can't beat him, and their blades clash in blue fire. Ghislain's eye blazes with a blue core as Frank screams that he will die here. Ghislain grins behind the crossed blades, calm in the middle of the storm. Frank's eye snaps wide as he catches the boy actually smiling. The two crash together again, swords ringing across the stone square. Ghislain's strike blasts Frank backward in a spray of blood. The two split apart, Frank skidding across the cobblestones. Frank tips his hat and asks if he didn't already warn the boy. Frank insists that little mana won't work, blood at his mouth. Frank buckles and coughs. Stunned, his enhancement gave way. Frank panics that the force behind these strikes feels completely different. Ghislain steps closer and says he never knew a real culprit hid behind Elena's death. Dark mana coils around Ghislain and glowing points flare across his chest. Red mana pours out of Ghislain as he tells Frank to brace himself. Frank jerks back and demands to know how the boy boosted his mana so far. Ghislain grips his sword in both hands and drives straight at Frank. Frank's eye snaps wide as he mutters that the boy is fast. The two trade a storm of blows, sparks bursting off every clash. Ghislain guards with one arm, a single pale eye locked on Frank. They collide again and a red ribbon of mana whips around the square. Frank blocks the blade and panics that his hands are going numb. Frank's sword cracks apart under the weight of the blows. Frank strains to hold the splitting sword as Ghislain bears down. Red mana wraps Ghislain and Frank swears the boy has become someone else. Ghislain's blade shatters Frank's weapon and the shards scatter. Ghislain lunges past and opens a deep cut across the staggering Frank. Frank reels back with blood spraying from the fresh wound. Ghislain's blade rips across Frank in a cold, clean arc. The two grapple close as blood pours from Frank's wounds. Frank throws his head back and screams, blood spilling from his mouth. Ghislain's strike smashes straight into Frank's face. Ghislain stands over the wrecked square and offers to finish their earlier talk. He seizes Frank by the collar and demands to know who ordered the hit. Frank claws at the stones and rasps that he won't go down so easily. Frank lunges for the fallen Elena, vowing to drag her down with him. Frank thrusts his dagger with a scream to die. Red mana threads snare Frank's arm and stop the strike cold. Ghislain grips his wrist and offers to make a deal. Ghislain's eye glows as he tells Frank to drop the tricks and answer him. Frank strains against the mana threads, unable to move a muscle. Ghislain stands with glowing threads spun straight from his hand. Ghislain says a man of Frank's skill can surely patch himself back up. Then he warns that none of it matters once he destroys Frank's mana core. Frank jerks in shock and chokes out a single what. Ghislain pins Frank by the collar and drives a thin blade into his chest. Frank screams as the strike reaches the core buried inside him. Frank's glowing mana core cracks and his power starts scattering. Frank panics that the backflow could explode and level the whole area. Ghislain scoffs that blowups are for amateurs and he can handle it. Ghislain hauls the bleeding Frank up by the collar. Frank chokes that this is not the deal Ghislain promised him. Ghislain smirks and asks why a killer is scared when it's his own turn. Frank breaks into a shaky laugh as Ghislain's eye narrows. Frank sneers that killing him changes nothing. The Degard job is done. Ghislain covers Frank's face, but Frank spits that Perdium will fall to war. Ghislain grips Frank's face and says he was reborn after he died. He tells Frank that this time everything will be different. Frank throws his head back and screams as his core tears apart. A pillar of released mana shoots up into the night sky. The mana bursts apart in a blinding flash above the town. Ghislain stands alone with his blades as the blast fades over the ruins. Frank's body sprawls across the blood-soaked stones. Only a ragged, heavy panting breaks the quiet over the corpse. Ghislain glances back over his shoulder, breathing hard, blood on his face. He stands near his unconscious sister, who lies still on the ground. Ghislain drives his sword into the stones to hold himself upright. He tips his head back with a long, heavy exhale. Then a sharp pain rips through him and he flinches. Ghislain drops to his knees, coughing, his body giving out. He curses that 3 cores were nothing back when he was the Mercenary King. Footsteps echo as he drags himself toward a doorway, swearing he won't fall. Ghislain crashes through a doorway into a wrecked, collapsed building. He clutches his bloody chest and recalls a second body found here in his past life. A family crest with a black eagle marks the wall of the memory. A blonde corpse in dark round glasses lies bloodied on the floor. Ghislain realizes the Dagard sun and night were framed as Elena's killers. A torn black war banner flies over a field of the dead. His bloody hand closes around a dark object as he moves to erase the evidence. The whole building erupts in flames while Ghislain walks away unbroken. A hooded figure watches in silence from above as he leaves the burning town. Far below, Ghislain walks off alone while the cloaked stranger looks on. A shadow council sits around a glowing table, and every one of them is furious. A hooded man kneels in the center of the ring, barely able to get a word out. He chokes out that all of it traces back to one man, Ghislain Perdium. One of the seated bosses scoffs and asks if he means that useless bastard of the north. The boss says everyone knows Ghislain is worthless, and asks if he is just an excuse. The kneeling man sweats hard and swears the kid was nothing like the rumors. Then he remembers it. Ghislain raising his blade, one blue eye locked forward. The boy tore into Frank and the strikes came faster than the eye could follow. Ghislain carved him up across the square, blood flying off every swing. A skull mark burned inside Frank's eye as his own power turned against him. Frank blocked, staggered, then came apart under the boy's blows. He screamed as the mana ripped loose from his shattered core. The whole building burned while Ghislain walked out untouched, a completely different man. A council member waves it off since Dagard is handled and the territorial war can still start. He begs for one more chance, and the council snaps that he could not even scout one kid. He forces out a yes, and the boss looms in, asking what kind of chance he even wants. Red light burns around the man as he swears he will get rid of Ghislain. He grins wide and says he will make a duel happen all on its own. The boss leans closer, and the assassin says he already has someone in mind. 2 figures sit in the dark, one lifting a hand as a name comes up. His name is Cain Loges, a fighter famous for raw, strength-based swordsmanship. Blades shatter in the air around him, snapped apart by his bare strength. The assassin adds that Cain is Ghislain's own cousin, so no one has to force the meeting. The council goes quiet. The seated boss is just watching him now. From the shadows, the leader warns that one more failure means no next time, and the man swears he will not fail. The scene cuts to the Perdium Castle training hall, tall and gray against the mountains. Inside, an old knight in blue armor steps in, calling out that it is nearly mealtime. A blade of blue mana whips through the air before he can even finish. It snaps around the old knight, and he freezes with a startled shout. The thread lashes back across the hall toward whoever is steering it. A single hand catches the sword, blue mana coiled tight around the steel. Ghislain lowers the blade and mutters that it should do the trick. He turns, blonde hair over calm blue eyes, and asks what the old man needs. Then he spots him and calls out to Fergus, who apologizes for cutting into his training. Fergus stares, huge mustache and all, and asks how he pulled that off just now. Ghislain glances at the floating sword and answers, this? He calls it a mana thread, mana stretched out and used like a string. In his past life, he used it constantly, though back then it meant imploding his whole core. With far less mana now, he spins just one thread so he can still pull it off. Fergus admits he has trained mana for years and never seen anything like this. He cannot wrap his head around it since the boy barely trained before. The old knight wonders how he even dreamed this up, then asks what he wanted. Ghislain says he only stopped by to say one thing, and Fergus asks what. The old knight thanks him for protecting the young lady. Ghislain, back turned, says it was only what he should have done, then tells him to eat. The Perdium castle spreads out wide, all sharp towers and gray stone. A few days pass, and the festival sits shut down after a guard knight tried to traffic the young lady. At the table, Elena grumbles that nobody believes he was the one who saved her. She tells him to go set them straight, but he shrugs that they will not buy it anyway. Belinda fumes about Jamal and Philip, the creeps who tried to grab Elena for themselves. Still, Elena lived, and Ghislain sits across the table with a small, tired smile. Her survival choked off the war before it could start, but the enemy will not quit. He cannot hold them off alone forever, so he needs to build a real military force. A maid steps up to the table with a covered silver dish and a quiet "excuse me." Ghislain thinks he will have to wade into politics to make any of that happen. The cover lifts, and on the huge white plate sits one sad little scrap of bread. His blue eyes go flat as he stares down at the tiny portion. He asks Belinda why they are getting dessert first, and she says that is just their life now. A crash of noise cuts in, and Ghislain jerks upright as the plates rattle. Outside, a big bearded merchant roars for the family to pay back the cancelled festival. A whole mob packs the gate, fists and farm tools in the air, chanting for compensation. They scream for the nobles to come out, certain the family is swimming in money. Ghislain leans over the railing and asks what the hell is going on down there. Belinda mutters that she knew they would do this, and he shoots her a look. She explains the county lives off festival profits, and last year's run was enough. This time it got cut after a single day, so every merchant out there is livid. Ghislain's eyes go wide, and he asks if the county is really in that deep. He frowns at the window, since ignoring them will only make them push harder. He tells Fergus to send the soldiers down and settle the crowd. Fergus calmly answers that they have no soldiers, and Ghislain blinks. Most of them shipped out to the Forest of Monsters after an orc raid, still buried in it. A map shows Perdium boxed in, barbarians to the north, and a monster forest on the far side. Ghislain clicks his tongue at the window and calls the whole thing a mess. He drags Belinda aside to talk while Elena watches with a puzzled blink. Ghislain points out that she is the one who handles all of his money. He tells her to spend it on the merchants, but she flatly says there is none. She reminds him the Count cut his allowance, since his old self blew through every coin. It finally lands, and he asks if that means he is completely broke. He holds a hand out to borrow some, and Belinda smugly says she is tapped out too. Cursing under his breath, he sinks into the windowsill above the sprawling town. No money and no soldiers, and he knows future knowledge means nothing without coin. He wonders if the estate is hiding anything worth selling, then footsteps pound closer. A servant crashes through the door screaming for the young master. Ghislain calls him Ricardo and asks why he is in such a panic. Ricardo screams that there is a problem, since young Master Kane wants to see him. The name stops Ghislain cold, and he repeats it, Kane. The scene cuts to a knight, armor dented, face bloodied, gasping for air. A massive fist smashes into his jaw and blood sprays across the room. Another red-knuckled punch drives straight down with brutal force. A giant shadow of a man hammers him, raw power bursting pink on impact. The knight chokes out a broken sound as the beating finally drops him. Ghislain stands in the archway, a bloodied blade low in his hand and knights sprawled at his feet. One downed man lifts his head and weakly asks if it is really the young master. Ghislain looks down at him, jaw tight, saying nothing at all. A low voice says, "There you are," and Ghislain's blue eye snaps up. A giant of a man towers over him, bare chest streaked with blood and shadow. Kane grins down with gold eyes and greets him. "Hey, Ghislain," the cousin the council picked to bury him. A lone blue eye fills the frame as a voice sneers the main character finally showed up. The owner of that voice rises up, a mountain of a man with a bare, scarred chest. Kane grins down with gold eyes and greets Ghislain like a long-lost friend. Ghislain only stares back, blonde hair hanging over sharp blue eyes. And Ghislain knows this face from his past life, the giant beside a hooded stranger. Two banners hang crossed on the wall, the crest of Loges County and its old alliance. Kane stands tall in a heavy coat, a long sword strapped across his back. Back then, this cousin was his one real friend, and later his bitter enemy. In the present, Kane strides the hall, a knight in blue armor beaten flat between them. Ghislain turns to his servant Ricardo and asks what happened, and Ricardo stammers. Ricardo explains they answered a report of a brawl breaking out inside the tavern. They walked in and found Kane lounging there with his escort knight and guards. Kane recognized them and asked if the rumors about young Master Ghislain were true. As Commander Scoven spelled the rumors out, a hand clamped around the old man's throat. Kane hauled the commander off his feet, snarling that he dared lie to the heir of Loges. Ricardo mutters that this was how it happened, and Kane cuts in demanding the truth. Kane says the rumor claims Ghislain, who never trains, killed an orc barehanded and dropped the traitor knights. That is why Kane beat Scoven bloody, calling it a wake-up call to knock sense back in. Now Kane waits beside his cousin, watching him say nothing at all. Kane finds that strange, since the old Ghislain would have charged him over far less. A while back at the Loja Mansion, a voice had told Kain to kill Ghislain, and he balked. Kain sat slumped in his chair, hands clasped, chewing on that ugly order. A hooded man promised that if he pulled it off, an esteemed backer would fund House Loges. Kain admitted crushing a punk like Ghislain was easy, but the guy was still a landed heir. The hooded man laid out a plan, luring Ghislain into a duel staged as a tragic accident. He leaned in close, calling it a rare chance even for a man like Kain. Kain sighed that he never wanted to kill his own blood cousin. He agreed to ride out at once, and now wonders if they want Ghislain gone because he changed. Kain studies that blank face while the hooded escort waits at his shoulder. A slow grin spreads across Kain's mouth as he decides how to open this. Ghislain frowns and asks him what exactly he thinks he is doing. Kain snaps that the kid better fetch what was prepared for him, and Ghislain repeats, prepared. Kain throws his arms wide, saying the festival got ruined, so they should liven things up. His gold eye narrows as he asks his buddy whether he is wrong about that. Ghislain stands quiet, hands buried in his pockets, then lets out a small ah. Ghislain gets it now, that Kain always made him lay out drink and women on every visit. Back then he played along so he would not get beaten, but those days are done. Because of Kain's visits, Ghislain burned through piles of his own precious money. He remembers Belinda scolding that the Lord cut his support for wasting so much coin. Ghislain's face hardens as that old memory clicks into place. His blue eyes flare, and he sees the answer was standing right here the whole time. Kain's reflection sits in that eye, the kid's fresh source of money, till Kain barks his name. Ghislain blinks back to the room as his cousin shouts at him again. Kain gripes that he is still waiting, and Ghislain calmly agrees to bring it right now. Kain watches him from above, pleased with himself for a moment. Then Ghislain looks up and asks if Kain has forgotten a certain debt he owes. The hooded escort's head snaps sideways at that single word. Kain leans in confused as Ghislain says he covered every request himself, so pay back 1,000 gold. Ghislain holds his palm out while Kain sputters that none of it cost even 100 gold. Kain argues it was a friendship fee for their bond, and Ghislain thinks, friendship, my ass. Ghislain tells him to settle the debt before he beats the money out of him. The kid grins and admits he badly needs a whole lot of gold right now. Ricardo panics, whispering the young master cannot mean this, while Kain heaves a sigh. Kain's boot slides forward as the last of his patience finally snaps. He seizes Ghislain and growls the brat only acts bold because he keeps going easy on him. Kain grips his head, calling him a parasite off this land, and the scoundrel of the north mocks. Kain's knuckles crack tight as he winds up one heavy punch. He rears back over the bowed cousin and tells him to pull himself together. Ghislain lifts his eyes, calm, tracking the fist as it comes. Kain hurls the punch while Ghislain holds his ground, back turned to the crowd. Ricardo and the hooded escort freeze, their eyes going wide. Kain roars, and a blue streak cuts the air as Ghislain twists clean past the swing. Ghislain drives his fist deep into Kain's exposed gut. Kain's eye blows wide open and a stunned huh rips out of him. A white burst flashes as a second strike snaps hard across Kain's jaw. Kain grits his teeth and barely gets an arm up to catch it. Ghislain draws his fist back, gaze locked and perfectly steady. Kain crashes to the floor while the hooded escort scrambles behind him. The escort catches him mid-fall, shouting to ask if the young master is hurt, and Kain groans. Ghislain stands by the arch, telling Kain to quit whining since he clearly blocked that shot. The escort lunges in front, snarling at Ghislain to stand back. As the crowd gasps, he floored Kain. The onlookers buzz among themselves, asking if anyone caught a clear view of that. Ghislain glances back over his shoulder with one quiet aha. The kid smirks, catching on that this rescue act is exactly how they want to play it. The escort props Kain up, whispering about his acting, and Kain praises how neatly the blame landed. The escort grins that this is enough to justify a duel, and Kain spots a rare shot at backing. Kain tightens his grip, swearing to leave a real lasting impression this time. That promise of backing flashes back, and Kain figures now is the time to break the fading Perdium house. Kain pulls a blue glove on and bellows that Ghislain shamed nobility and struck him for seeking truth. He lifts a finger and starts to declare a formal duel against Ghislain, but a worn glove smacks Kain's face first, blue sparks snapping as Ghislain calls the duel instead. Ghislain stands firm, one fist raised above Kain's lowered head. Kain's eyes flash white, the rough glove still pressed against his stunned face. Ghislain lists the charges, that Kain insulted the Perdium heir before the whole town, and that Kain assaulted his knight Scoven, dragging the honor of nobility through the mud. Ghislain smiles, asking if his cousin really means to deny any of it. Kain goes quiet, then breaks into a laugh, saying he always knew the boy was dumb, but he laughs that he never figured Ghislain was reckless enough to book his own beating. Kane's hand closes around his glove and blade as he accepts the challenge. He rips his massive sword free, grinning, and warns Ghislain not to regret it even if he dies. Ghislain stares past the bright steel without a flicker, then calls out for Ricardo. Ricardo hurries over from the beaten knight and answers him right away. Ghislain orders him to round up every merchant still protesting outside the castle. Then Ghislain grins, telling him to promise them all that he will make them big money. The festival gets called off out of nowhere, and the whole town cools down fast. A crowd of tourists stayed behind, too bitter to just pack up and head home. They're stuck holding fat coin pouches with nothing fun left to spend them on. Ghislain knows a restless crowd like this is basically begging for a new show. That show is a duel, and Ghislain steps into the ring against his cousin Kain. The stands fill up while people scream for everyone to put money on Kain. Around the ring, vendors hawk cheap goods and shout buy one, get one free. A huge bearded bookie waves the crowd over and starts taking their wagers. Coins pour in fast since everyone treats a bet on Kain as easy money. Kain drives his massive sword straight into the ring floor with a loud crack. He glares at the betting stall and snaps that this sacred duel became a market. Kain warns that his blade won't stop swinging even if the kid surrenders. Ghislain stays silent for a beat, then quietly says that makes perfect sense. He reads Kain and the hooded escort clearly. Killing him is the real goal. Someone announces the crowd is set and the duel can finally get going, but the hooded escort throws up a hand and stops everything cold. He complains that the betting can't run properly the way things stand. The bookie and his helper trade a confused look across the table. Nobody put a single coin on Ghislain. The bookie sheepishly admits. Ghislain overhears that and keeps his face flat, giving nothing away. The crowd laughs that the outcome is obvious and nobody would back the kid. Kain grins that even the gamblers ignore him, then offers to change the bet. The escort suggests wagering on how long the kid can survive against Kain. He slaps a heavy coin pouch onto the table to get the wagers rolling. Then he says he'll back Ghislain himself, baiting the crowd to follow. Kain smirks at the whole setup, sure this is going exactly his way. He rolls his huge shoulders and lets everyone drink in that raw size. Then a blonde girl steps up and says she wants to bet on her big brother. The bookie and his helper freeze, totally thrown by the sudden wager. Ghislain's eyes snap wide the second he spots that blonde girl. It's Lady Elena, his own little sister, backing him right out in the open. Elena drops a fat purse and asks if it's enough, ignoring her maid's warning. Her white-haired maid frowns, having told her this bet was a bad idea. Kain snorts that the kid keeps stalling, then barks at him to get ready. He says he's the elder here, so striking first would look bad on him. Kain wraps both hands around his greatsword and lifts it up high. His grip tightens on the hilt as the wide blade catches the light. Ghislain stays loose, letting his own thin sword hang at his side. He lifts his eyes and tells Kain to just come at him already. Kain goes quiet, chewing on the kid's total lack of fear. Ghislain jabs that it's far too late for Kain to act like the polite elder. Then the fight kicks off and Kain launches himself across the ring. He comes straight down, greatsword raised high over his head. The blade crashes toward Ghislain, who slides in to meet it head on. Steel grinds against steel while Ghislain reads the swing up close. Kain roars that the kid already sank too low to save any face now. The blade rips sideways and Ghislain bends back under the arc. The blow smashes the floor as Ghislain drops into a low crouch. Kain hauls the sword up again and swings with everything he has. Ghislain springs clear right as the blade blows a crater in the ring. The crowd howls that the kid won't survive even one clean hit from Kain. Kain bares his teeth, loving how easy this whole thing feels. Ghislain keeps dodging while Kain laughs and asks if anyone sees this clown. In the stands, Ricardo panics and begs Lady Elena to stop the fight. Kain sneers that it's too late since crossing swords with him is a trap. His whole plan is to overwhelm foes with power until they only dodge and tire. Then the worn-out target finally slips, and Kain ends them right there. That one trick has won Kain every fight he has ever walked into. He whirls the greatsword in wide arcs, driving Ghislain around the ring. Kain admits the kid is slippery, and his footwork clearly sharpened up. Their blades lock, and Kain says that figures, the brat always loved running. Kain snarls that his cousin bolted from every real fight in the old days. Kain hurls another heavy cut and Ghislain twists out of its path. The kid vaults into the air as the blade rips up beneath him. Ricardo screams for his master while Kain grins that it's finally over. Kain's boot smashes into Ghislain and launches him off his feet. Ghislain sails high above the ring with nothing at all under him. He says he meant to go easy, but Kain's killing intent crossed the line. Mid-fall, his eyes blaze blue as mana floods down into his legs. He snaps upright in an instant and lands clean as Kain lunges in. Kain's face face twists in shock at how the kid just reset himself. He realizes Ghislain packed mana into his legs to steady that landing. Ghislain exhales and calls Kain's whole sword style clumsy and ignorant. He says Kain only felt unbeatable because scared foes never fought back. Ghislain levels his sword and offers to open his cousin's eyes for him. Kain grits his teeth, furious that the runt is lecturing him now. Kain charges again and roars to ask how the kid plans to manage that. His feet dig in hard as he closes the gap in a single heartbeat. He brings the greatsword down, but Ghislain flows right past it. Ghislain slips inside his reach and cracks a fist into his ribs. The two trade blows in a blur, and now Kain is the one eating hits. Kain howls as Ghislain's blade carves a clean line across his guard. Ghislain cuts him again, and the giant staggers back a heavy step. Another strike lands flush and rattles Kain down to the bone. Ghislain presses forward, eyes cold, reading every gap in the defense. He finishes the flurry and Kain sinks to one knee behind him. Ghislain glances back over his shoulder without a hint of strain. Kain kneels there bloodied, his huge sword stuck in the ground. The bookie and his helper stare with their jaws hanging open. Now the whole crowd panics, realizing the kid they mocked might win. Up in the stands, Elna smirks and tells her maid, "See, told you so." Down on the ring, Kain blinks through the blood in his eyes. He notices the cut is shallow when Ghislain could have gone far deeper. It hits him that the kid held that killing blade back on purpose. Kain can't grasp where a nobody suddenly found swordsmanship like this. Ghislain stands over him, calm, owning the whole fight now. He looks back at his beaten cousin and says nothing at all. Then Ghislain flicks his sword away and lets it clatter to the floor. He says a skill gap this wide won't give the crowd any real show. Ghislain announces he'll take the rest of this fight with bare hands. Kain's eye goes huge, certain he must have misheard that. Ghislain says he'll use this chance to teach his cousin a real lesson. He rolls up a sleeve, makes a fist, and promises to beat it in. Kain's face twists as he spits it back. "Educate me?" Ghislain offers a bare-handed brawl instead. Ghislain rolls his sleeves up before the ring as the fur-cloaked escort jerks back, stunned. His blue eyes lock forward as he bets 2,000 more gold, twice the first, that he wins. Three gamblers pressed together, faces scrunched, one fretting this was meant to be a clean duel. The escort sweats under his hood, calling Ghislain insane, then oddly thankful for the madness. His grin creeps up, and deep down he decides fortune is still on his side. The bearded bookie throws his hands up and bellows for fresh bets on the bare-handed fight. An overhead shot drops on the ring, and this time the crowd starts swinging toward Ghislain. Ghislain stands tall, shirt open, and calmly cracks his knuckles for the room. Kain hunches forward and laughs low, sneering that bare-handed nonsense just makes him laugh. His fist clamps the greatsword, and he tells Ghislain to fight unarmed while he keeps the blade. Kain launches off the floor, cloak flaring, as Ghislain's bare hand stretches up to meet him. He hauls the greatsword overhead and roars that he'll use the sword after all. Up in the stands, the maid cups her mouth and yells for the young lord to grab his sword too. The word die splashes in red as Kain's heavy blade rips straight down. Ghislain doesn't flinch under the falling steel, set on knocking some sense into his cousin. The blade smashes the floor and cracks the ring, but Ghislain has slipped past and cocks a fist. Ghislain drives in close and jams the sword arm up before the greatsword can bite. His boots stamp out fast little steps as he cuts around Kain's guard. Kain heaves the blade across while Ghislain darts low beneath it in a blue streak. Ghislain's fist slams into Kain's gut, and the big man folds around it. His eyes stay ice cold as he draws the fist back, reading the next opening. He rams another punch under Kain's jaw and snaps the giant's bloody head back. The strike cracks across Kain's skull, and blood sprays into the air. Kain crashes onto all fours, dripping and heaving as a grunt scrapes out. His head hangs upside down, stunned. How does this punk move? Ghislain looms over him. The crowd howls that Ghislain might actually win, while Kain kneels by his sword. Ghislain looks down flat and tells Kain to get up, because he hasn't even started. Kain's face splits with rage, teeth bared, blood in his eyes as a snarl tears out. Kain hurls himself up and swings the greatsword in a huge arc across the ring. He slashes, Ghislain leans clear, and Kain spits the kid never dared meet his eyes. They clash close as Kain snarls Ghislain used to bow the second he showed up. Ghislain traps the sword arm again and pins the blade as the bloody giant strains. Kain forces the greatsword down, screaming he must kill Ghislain for the Loges family's future. His battered face screams through the blood, one eye wild, his whole body shaking. Ghislain answers with a storm of fists, each one cracking into Kain in a blur. Kain's head sags low, blood dripping off his chin as he huffs and wonders why. Ghislain grabs a fistful of Kain's bloody hair and drags his head up. He leans in and says he pities Kane's father, and the giant just manages a confused sound. Ghislain says Count Logar propped up dying Perdium purely out of friendship with his father. His profile hardens as he adds that the old man's son carried a very different plan. Kane's ruined face fills the panel, one swollen eye staring through the blood. Years back, Rain hammers a dark manor as a voice asks if the Count is aiding Perdium again. A cloaked Count Lodges walks the hall as his people carp that funding Perdium is a cracked bucket. Young Kane stands in the manor hall and watches his father start to leave. His young face stays cold and silent, jaw locked tight. Kane calls out through the dim hall and tells his father not to go. He demands why the Count keeps helping Perdium when everyone tries to stop him. Count Logis pauses, then answers simply that it is just because they are friends. On the ring, Kane's swollen face drips as those words echo. There was no other reason. Ghislain drives another blow into Kane's bowed head, blue light trailing his arm. Kane's face caves, eyes rolling white as Ghislain asks if that was enough to educate him. His single eye jerks wide, a stunned mark flashing across it. Ghislain reaches a hand down to the fallen giant and tells him to get up. Kane stares up at the offered hand, the blurred crowd frozen behind him. He shuts his eyes and lowers his head, admitting his defeat. Ghislain stands with his sword on the floor, hand out, as Kane kneels bowed in surrender. The gamblers and the bookie freeze mid-cheer, jaws dropping in stunned rouse. Under his hood, the escort gapes, sweat pouring, mouth hanging open. A shout rings that Ghislain has won, and the crowd erupts, some cheering, others wailing. Elena throws her fists up and cheers that her big bro won, while the maid stares in shock. The escort storms across the ring on heavy steps, closing on the kneeling Kane. He seizes Kane's face, raging that he can't fold over a small edge, snarling that he trusted him. Kane shoves it back and says he's done, leaving the escort spluttering a shocked what. The escort grinds his teeth and curses Kane as a weak little brat. Ghislain steps up calm and simply says, "Now," and the escort spins toward him with a jolt. His face breaks into a bright grin. He's just gotta do what he's gotta do. Ghislain booms to the arena that this man is treating everyone to meat and drinks. Out on the ring, Ghislain lifts his sword by the kneeling Kane as the call rolls over the stands. The escort locks up in horror while the crowd roars for the feast and their young lord. Furious, the escort screams he never agreed and demands Ghislain take it back as a hand grips him. Ghislain's grip crushes down, calling it the price for losing, not counted against the bet. He slings an arm around the escort before the cheering crowd, playing the friendly winner. Ghislain leans in and reminds him to add 2,000 gold onto the 1,000 they first set. A red mana haze curls off Ghislain as he warns the escort knows what happens if he runs. The escort's eye blows wide in terror, a choked gasp escaping him. Ghislain strolls off cool as the escort crumples by Kane and forces out a shaky understood. The huge Perdium castle rises over the town while the crowd's cheers roll on. The next day, a tall Gothic window catches the light in Ghislain's room. A chest sits open on the table, light spilling off the gold packed inside. Ghislain looks into the pile and figures he could hire a small mercenary corps with this. He lifts one coin and weighs it, admitting the haul is no small amount. Still, he frowns that gold takes time to grow and his enemies won't wait. Elena and the maid drift in behind him, both wearing sly little smiles. Ghislain cuts a sharp glance over his shoulder and asks what they want. Elena leans in with a pout and asks where her big bro plans to spend it all. Ghislain offers her a cut, and Elena instantly waves it off, saying she was just asking. The gold's target is obvious. The maid smirks, and Ghislain looks puzzled. The maid grins that Lady Amelia's birthday is near, so he staged the show to buy her a gift. Ghislain glances back as Elena groans he did all that to look good for his fiancée. He goes still, and his face drops as it finally lands. He has a fiancée. Ghislain sits by the gold chest, stunned that he had a fiancée this whole time. Belinda and Elena grin and tease him for playing dumb about Amelia of Rayfold County. The name drags up a memory, and a cold face with pale eyes surfaces in his head. A blood-red spider crawls a glowing web as he remembers exactly who that woman was. To the world, she is Amelia Rayfold, a perfect apple everyone adores for her kindness. Ghislain knows the rot underneath since she becomes the traitor called the Witch of the North. She keeps a gentle smile while joining the Delphine Duchy to finish Perdium for good. Snapping back, Ghislain asks Belinda when his father returns, and she guesses a week. A week is all he needs, and his eyes narrow as a plan clicks into place. He turns for the door and tells Belinda he is leaving for Rayfold County right now. She protests it is not even Amelia's birthday, and he smirks that he wants their gold. A memory shows how she built her name, kneeling to hand a barefoot girl new shoes. Amelia leans close, red eyes soft, a spider on her lip, and tells the girl to wear them. A whole crowd watches their lady crouch in the dirt for one poor child in rags. The girl clutches her hands, filthy and shaking, and chokes out the name Lady Amelia. Amelia says plainly that if anyone here must go barefoot, it should be her instead. She orders the guards to bring food and shelter, and a knight snaps back, "Yes, my lady." Soldiers haul in barrels and crates while the ragged villagers stare in disbelief. Grateful voices thank her again and again as she stands tall before the crowd. Present day in her garden, a servant kneels at the gazebo and washes her bare feet. The man scrubbing her feet is Bernaf, her escort knight, praising her fine work today. Amelia pets a fat white cat and says her father always demanded pure obedience. She strokes the purring cat and adds that folk follow whoever keeps them warm and fed. Bernaf says the shoe act won the people's hearts and helps her in the succession race. Amelia stays quiet, red eyes half lidded, the little spider resting on her lip. Then she plants her bare foot onto Bernaf's face and shoves it against his cheek. From her bench, she presses down and asks about his duel with the North's finest sword. Bernaf apologizes under her soul, saying he lost on purpose to avoid drawing eyes. He explains a win would draw attention to her, and it is not yet time to bare her claws. Bernaf lowers his head and kisses her foot, swearing his blade belongs only to her. Amelia says, of course, reminding him coldly how much she poured into raising him. She hooks her toes under his chin and tips his face up while he kneels in silence. Leaning in with a hard red stare, she warns Bernaf he is never allowed to be weak. Amelia asks about the merchants, and Bernaf says the Arctium Guild runs fine. Bernaf says their guild handles the rebuild orders for the orc-smashed Forest of Beasts. They reclaim Rayfold's yearly aid and recruit Perdium's veterans as they leave. Amelia nods and orders him to keep it all looking like a plain, ordinary merchant guild. Their true strength must stay hidden when a nervous butler steps into the garden. Bernaf demands who let him in, and the butler stammers that Ghislain has arrived. Amelia's face darkens, red eyes sharp, and she snaps why that punk would show up here. The sweating butler struggles for words, his big frilled collar shaking as he stalls. He admits Ghislain wants to talk about the Merchant Guild, which freezes them both. Down the hall, warm lamps glow along the dark gold walls of the visitor's room. Amelia settles on her sofa with the cat while Ghislain lounges across in a red coat. He sits cross-legged, great sword propped beside him, flowers in hand, and greets her. Amelia glares with cold red eyes while the white cat bristles and hisses at the guest. She scolds him for barging in with no warning and asks if he ever learned manners. Ghislain smirks that her birthday is near, so he grabbed her a sweet-smelling flower. He tosses the bouquet on the table and asks, all casual, what that shop was called. Lifting a golden cup, he answers himself, the Arctium Merchant Guild, was it not? Amelia's red eyes flicker for a beat, yet she keeps her face still and says nothing. She plays it off, telling him she has no idea what he is trying to get at. Amelia stands with her cat, thanks him for the gift, and coolly tells him goodbye. His voice stops her cold, using her full name and ordering Amelia Rayfold to sit down. A heavy pressure slams down on her, purple energy crackling around her widened eye. The golden cup rattles on the table as she wonders where this crushing weight comes from. Amelia stares back, shaken, remembering this boy once could barely speak near her. Ghislain sips the cup and cuts to it, saying he needs 10,000 gold right now. Amelia's red eyes snap wide with a sharp what at the size of the sum he just named. She asks if this comes from Count Perdium, and Ghislain says his father is not involved. He leans in with a thin smile and points out she never planned to marry him anyway. Amelia's eyes lock onto his, both burning red, as she sees he knows far too much. Ghislain twists deeper, hinting that as lord she could even keep that escort knight. Then he warns that leaking her secret power grab would ruin her in the succession war. Amelia hugs the fluffy cat close and says his name in a low, warning tone. Her red eyes go flat as she tells him not to say a thing like that, even as a joke. Ghislain vows to bury her secret unless he leaves empty-handed, and she refuses flat. She calls out sharply for Bernaf as the tall gold doors creak open behind him. Bernaf strides in with his rapier at his side, footsteps echoing down the marble. The knight bows toward Ghislain and greets him, saying it has been a while, young lord. Ghislain sizes him up, thinking this is Bernaf, who has never left Amelia's side. He knows this shadow with the rapier could match the North's finest sword in his prime. Ghislain warns that killing him could spark a war and asks if she can handle it. Amelia lifts a hand and says the world will only hear a ruffian broke in and died. Her finger brushes her lip, red eyes gleaming, and she calmly says to kill that man. Bernaf levels his rapier straight at Ghislain and answers, as you wish, my lady. Ghislain sits in the dark a moment, then says quietly, if that is how they want to play. He grips his greatsword with a grin, blue eyes flashing, ready to get a little serious. Ghislain grips his heavy greatsword while Bernaf looms behind him, rapier raised high. Bernaf's cold eyes narrow, fixed dead on the back of Ghislain's blonde head. Ghislain's blue eyes sharpen and a small grin creeps across his mouth. Seconds earlier, Ghislain is still parked on the couch, greatsword resting by his knee. Then Bernaf drops from above in a sudden lunge, blade stabbing straight down. Ghislain twists aside and rams a fist into him, blood spraying off the hit. Bernaf flips helplessly over an ornate golden chair, arms and legs flailing. Ghislain's arm hurls him further, a red trail of blood chasing the throw. The masked knight crashes onto the marble floor while Ghislain lands on his feet. Bernaf and Amelia both freeze, eyes blown wide that he shrugged off the ambush. Ghislain names it plainly, an assassin faking manners before a surprise attack. He scoffs that stabbing a guest counts as some pretty poor hospitality. The blades screech together again as Bernaf rushes back in with the rapier. Ghislain taunts him, asking if House Rayfold has never once heard of chivalry. Bernaf apologizes flatly, calling Ghislain the rude one for barging in uninvited. He snaps that a man who rattles the lady never earned any politeness at all. The two trade a blur of thrusts and swings, sharp steel ringing off steel. Ghislain ducks low under the rapier, red coat flaring as he slides over the floor. Bernaf presses in with a glowing blue arc that forces Ghislain down to one knee. They break apart across the hall, both crouched and panting, weapons held ready. Bernaf recalls the rumors that young Lord Ghislain was all talk with no real skill. Now he admits this brat is clearly no rookie once you actually cross blades. Amelia snaps at Bernaf, demanding what he is doing against a mere punk like that. She leans close, a red spider on her lip, ordering him to bring back the head. She dares him to prove he truly is her sword, and Bernaf answers with dead silence. Then he steadies the rapier and swears in a low voice that he will not disappoint her. Blue energy roars up around Bernaf as he growls at Ghislain to come forth. Ghislain smirks wide, amused that a lowly escort knight dares to order him around. He turns his back on him, saying he did him a favor, but if he really insists. Ghislain levels his sword down the hall at the crouched knight and agrees to oblige. Bernaf strikes first, his rapier trailing a long ribbon of blue light. Ghislain meets it head on, sparks screaming where the two edges grind together. Blood streaks his cheek and Ghislain grins that this guy is seriously fast. Bernaf's face twists hard, teeth bared as he shoves the pace even faster. The pair blur into clashing blades, blue light shredding across the dim room. Amelia stares, stunned that a so-called lousy punk trades blows with Bernaf evenly. Her red eyes narrow on the duel, certain the tide is about to swing back. Bernaf snaps a kick through and Ghislain catches it on his braced blade. The rapier scrapes up along his sword, its point hunting straight for his throat. They collide once more at center hall, blue arcs spitting off both weapons. Bernaf lunges again, one hand outstretched, the thin blade aimed at Ghislain's eyes. The rapier whips down and Ghislain barely tilts his head clear of the tip. Bernaf rams the point forward, a burst of white pressure flattening the air. Ghislain grits through it, muttering that Bernaf is pulling that same trick again. Bernaf carves another blue arc across, herding Ghislain toward the back wall. A thin cut splits Ghislain's lip as the relentless thrusts keep finding him. Bernaf crashes into him chest to chest, locking him up at grappling range. Face to face, Bernaf warns coldly that the trick will not work a second time. He hammers straight down and blasts Ghislain off his feet in a spray of light. Ghislain slams onto the ground with a grunt, the air knocked clean out of him. Bernaf stalks in, rapier cocked back, that blue lit point tracking every twitch. He swings hard at Ghislain sprawled on the floor, forcing a desperate roll clear. Ghislain skids back on his heels while Bernaf resets into a low ready stance. Bernaf studies him, realizing the brat is soaking up every hit with raw mana. He grants that young Lord Ghislain looks nothing like the rumors he had heard. Bernaf guesses the rough swordsmanship came from real combat, maybe against barbarians. Still, he warns that battlefield tricks fall apart against a proper trained duelist. He declares flatly that Ghislain's little detour ends right here and now. Ghislain wipes off the sweat and admits to himself this fight is really rough. The head-hunting thrusts wreck his range, and up close, Bernaf's size overwhelms skill. Ghislain concedes Bernaf was never a foe he should have picked a fight with yet. Still, his eyes go cold, because he does not have much time to spare either. Ghislain snaps his hand out, and a razor-thin white line lashes across the gap. Bernaf's eyes flick sideways as he catches a strange coil of mana in the air. He grasps too late that the shimmer is an actual thread whipping toward his face. The mana thread slashes across Bernaf's brow, ripping a deep cut over his eye. The two whip past each other, Ghislain's coat snapping as Bernaf reels aside. Ghislain spins in close and cracks a fist across Bernaf's jaw at point blank. Bernaf staggers, blood down his face, gasping what on earth Ghislain just pulled. Amelia's calm shatters as she screams Bernaf's name across the wrecked hall. Ghislain towers over the kneeling knight and hauls his greatsword up to swing. He brings the heavy blade crashing straight down at Bernaf's exposed head. Bernaf throws his rapier up with a roar, catching the greatsword just in time. Steel grinds on steel overhead as Bernaf strains to hold that massive edge back. They shove off and split apart, Bernaf wheeling to face Amelia across the hall. Bernaf reaches back toward Amelia, who clutches her cat, telling her to flee now. He warns he cannot keep her safe like this, then vows to give the fight his all. Ghislain only smiles, saying that is exactly the entertaining opponent he wanted. Amelia bolts down the golden hall, clutching her white cat tight against her chest. Her face burns with rage, blood on her lips, snarling that Ghislain humiliated her. Still running, she wonders who leaked the Merchant Guild's secrets to that madman. She recalls his rumors of slain orcs and a beaten heir, once written off as luck. Her red eye flares with hate, and she spits a curse under her ragged breath. Amelia races past a pillar, furious that her stationed guards are nowhere in sight. Then she freezes. Her guards lie sprawled everywhere, and a cloaked figure waits ahead. The stranger stands calm among the corpses, red-lined cloak, heels on the tile. A hood hides silver hair and pink eyes, and she smirks that it has been a while. Amelia gasps, recognizing Perdium's own maid, and stammers why she is even here. The maid lifts a finger and hushes her with a quiet shh from under the shadow. In a blink, she slips behind Amelia, a thin blade at her throat, hushing her. Amelia goes stiff, eyes wide, as the blade hovers by the red spider on her lip. The maid tuts that the creepy spider still suits her poorly, then plucks it off. She recalls eavesdropping on Count Rayfold and her lord at the engagement ceremony. Amelia's siblings mocked her spiders as a child, so she bred a swarm and took revenge. Back in the hall, she mocks whether the lip spider is healed trauma or plain vanity. The maid lets the red spider fall, telling the lady plainly that it never suited her. Her heel slams down and grinds the little spider flat against the marble floor. Only crushed legs remain, and the maid calmly asks Amelia for her full cooperation. Across the hall, Ghislain squares off with Bernaf again, both catching breath. Ghislain narrows his eyes and mutters to himself that the air has turned rough. Bernaf flares with blue mana, and Ghislain feels the sheer weight of it press down. Bernaf throws his taunt back, sneering about that talk of an entertaining opponent. He scoffs that lowly mercenaries talk that way, and doubts this brat is any noble. Ghislain grins that he is noble, and needles Bernaf as just a hired escort knight. The two set their stances across the wrecked hall, light curling off both blades. Bernaf strikes first, ramming his glowing rapier against Ghislain's braced greatsword. Bernaf's eyes blaze as he roars at Ghislain not to disgrace the nobility. He unloads a storm of mana thrusts, and Ghislain braces as the barrage screams in. Bernaf's face sets in cold focus, blood flecking the air as he presses even harder. The knight looms above Ghislain, blue spears bursting on him in a shower of sparks. A thin edge slices Ghislain's cheek, and he grits his teeth at the fierce rush. Ghislain snarls that this guy just will not let up for even a single second. Bernaf rains blade after blade, and Ghislain owns the man pushes too fiercely. Ghislain roars enough with that and heaves his greatsword up to smash it aside. Steel meets steel at center hall, sparks spitting where greatsword grinds on rapier. Ghislain leaps in and hammers his blade down, forcing Bernaf to catch it overhead. Bernaf twists free and whips his rapier out, a hard blue arc trailing off the tip. The point rockets forward, blue mana screaming down the length of the thin blade. Bernaf rolls his wrist into another wide arc, driving Ghislain back onto his heels. Ghislain staggers, sparks flying as the knight keeps hammering the pressure on. Ghislain reels, bloody and breathing hard, while Bernaf calls his name once more. Bernaf gathers a huge blue blade and tells him that last swing was his final attack. They collide in a dark flash, the rapier driving in as blood sprays across the tiles. Ghislain's bloodied face stays dead calm, his eyes blank and locked on the knight. He braced on purpose, turning his shoulder to shove the deadly point off its true line. The two break apart and clash again, a blue spark flaring where the blades cross. Bernaf grants he cannot lower his guard till the end, then adds a cold however. They both drop low and lunge, rapier and greatsword crossing at mid-haul. Bernaf's thrust lands clean, blue mana bursting against Ghislain's middle in a flash. Bernaf names the gap between them, a true fighter against one who fights for fun. The blow hurls Ghislain back across the hall, sparks trailing off his staggered frame. Blood drips from Ghislain's chin and a wide grin spreads under it anyway. Battered and bleeding, Ghislain grins that this fight is exactly the fun he wanted. In his head, he breaks it down, since Bernaf's speed and range steer the entire flow. He knows a bind gets shut down, and his mana now cannot match that strength. Bernaf charges once more, a huge white blade of mana blazing along his rapier. Ghislain adds that he only means the mana he happens to hold at this exact moment. He grips the great sword in both hands, calling it a shame to end this here. Wreathed in red, Ghislain warns there is one thing the knight completely overlooked. His eyes burn purple as a mana core ignites, powered by his own cultivation technique. Ghislain bursts forward with a blaze of power, unleashing what he calls his third core. He leaps in like a rocket, and Bernaf barely lifts his rapier to guard. His hands clamp the hilt, red mana pouring down the greatsword as he drives it in. Ghislain slams the blade down while Bernaf's thin rapier strains to hold it back. The two edges grind together, red and blue mana screaming where the weapons lock. Ghislain's power breaks the bind, and the rapier tears loose to stab into the floor. Bernaf's bloodied face goes slack with shock as he chokes out Ghislain's name. He cannot grasp how this man pours out such explosive mana in the middle of a fight. Ghislain's greatsword rises to Bernaf's face, and a sharp scream rips through the hall. Ghislain stops the edge at the knight's throat, the maid still gripping Amelia. Amelia screams for him to take 10,000 gold and vanish, a knife pressed to her neck. Ghislain sighs that this whole mess is a hassle, blood streaked down his tired face. Blade still at his throat, he notes she should have just paid when asked nicely. The maid teases that this seems steep for a lover's quarrel, and he shrugs off the jab. Ghislain turns toward Amelia and warns her that some unfortunate news is coming her way. He smirks that her fee just doubled to 20,000 gold, blade over his shoulder. The Grand Hall is wrecked, knights strewn across the red carpet, swords snapped in the dust. A tall vase bursts into white shards as the plant beside it topples off the cabinet. Amelia stands in the wreck while her knight Bernaf faces her across the broken glass. Bernaf bows his head and apologizes, admitting the man was far stronger than the rumors claimed. Amelia stays silent, her red eyes burning as the anger sets hard into her face. Bernaf asks whether she wants to report the whole incident to the Delphine Duchy. Amelia steps in close and reaches up toward the knight's collar. She yanks him down, snapping at him to mind his mouth and grasp how terrifying Duke Delphine is. Amelia secretly allied with Duke Delphine, who backs her rebellion while she helps topple Perdium. Her red eye narrows. If he knows the guild's secret, he might know the deal, so Ghislain has to die. Bernaf lowers his eyes and answers with one flat word, understood. Bernaf reports he left shallow cuts on the man and one deep gash across the shoulder. The knight adds Ghislain burned huge mana, so he won't reach full strength for a while. Amelia leans over a war map of flags. Using their own knights leaves a trail, and she knows it. A cold smile crosses her face while Bernaf stiffens. She keeps others trained for these jobs. Bernaf breathes out the name of the Wildcats as hooded killers gather under a beast's shadow. A hand plants a flag. The Wildcats are war orphans with no kin, handpicked purely for raw talent. Amelia points at the mark and orders a dozen gathered, taking only the ones skilled with mana. Bernaf's eyes darken as he murmurs that he sees exactly where this is heading. The plan lands on a ravine, the one narrow pass from Rayfold land into Perdium, remote and tight. Bernaf sets his jaw and swears he will get the killers ready in time. Amelia's face looms over the departing carriage as she vows Ghislain will pay for humiliating her. Inside the carriage, Ghislain sits in his young blonde body, tightening the cloth around his fist. He quietly wonders whether Amelia is the one who comes hunting for him first. Across from him sit old knight Fergus and maid Belinda, and Fergus asks if he's hurt. Ghislain waves it off. Ghislain checks the cuts and finds them shallow, not bad for a man who pushed things too far. He looks out the window. The 20,000 gold from Amelia rebuilds his territory's base funds. Dark battlefield memories flash through his head, and he won't gamble the territory on a whim. Ghislain pulls his coat on since Perdium already fights the barbarians and can't afford another war. He straightens his shirt, certain the Arctium Guild's secret is leash enough on Amelia for now. His eyes settle cold and clear because this time he means to put that leverage to real use. Belinda sits across the seat and watches him in total silence. From above, Belinda asks if it all went the way he said. Ghislain answers with a puzzled, Belinda recaps the plan. She was to hit the guards once fighting broke out, then seize Lady Amelia. Ghislain admits he did say that, then notes he told Fergus to handle the guards. His face twists as red sparks crackle off his skin and pain rips through his body. Ghislain buckles over and Fergus lunges up, shouting for him. It is the recoil from his third core. Ghislain stares at his bloody palm. The backlash is milder now, yet it bites each time he draws power. He curls the bleeding hand into a fist, knowing he needs to raise his mana fast. Belinda suddenly takes his hand, and Ghislain blinks at her in surprise. She turns his palm over, a thin needle in her fingers, and says, "The mana flow inside him is a mess." Belinda presses her glowing hands against him while Fergus watches tensely from the side. Ghislain's eye snaps wide as he feels her power threading through his body. A purple glow wraps his face while the strange technique takes hold. His eyes fall shut as her mana streams straight through his core. Ghislain looks at his hand, stunned his tangled mana road has opened, a trick that takes deep skill. His eye lingers on her. Belinda was never a normal maid, not since his mother brought her home. Blue mana curls around Belinda, and Ghislain wonders why someone this skilled hides as a country maid. Ghislain wants every skilled hand he can gather, because the enemies he's faced are only the start. The carriage rolls on down the road, and Belinda calls out to the young master again. Belinda says she'll back him on anything, then asks why he took such a huge sum from Amelia. Ghislain goes quiet, then says flatly he needs money, and Amelia's the only rich person he knows. Fergus jerks his head up and blurts out a startled pardon. Fergus asks if that broke the engagement and warns Count Rayfold will retaliate. Ghislain says Amelia can't tell her father. Ghislain leans back, calm, and asks the two of them if they trust him. Belinda gives an awkward smile and presses him to at least tell his partner what the money buys. Ghislain's mouth goes flat and he lets the question hang for a beat. Belinda's eyes fix on him as his answer drops. The Forest of Beasts. Deep in that forest, a massive beast with burning red eyes looms through the dark trees. Ghislain folds his hands and says plainly that he means to pioneer the Forest of Beasts. Fergus protests that men have tried to tame that land since his great-grandfather's day and all failed. Ghislain holds his stare and asks if Fergus recalls the request from before they entered the castle. The old knight hesitates, uneasy, and mutters the young master's name. Fergus's gloved fists tighten hard against his knees as he steadies himself. Fergus admits the man he was sent to find sat right where Ghislain said, but his condition is rough. Ghislain says a living man is enough and wants to go now, but Fergus insists they head home first. Ghislain asks Belinda if she really thinks Amelia lets them walk now. Belinda lets out a small ah. Belinda throws up her fist to just fight it out since she hits hard and Fergus is a knight. Ghislain grins and tells them he needs a vanguard and they're already on their way to meet him. The carriage reaches a rough frontier village of wooden shacks tucked against the mountains. A gloved fist raps hard against a weathered wooden door. The group gathers at a rundown house that looks abandoned, though the address says it's the place. The door drags open with a long creak and the whole group tenses at once. An old man with wild white hair and a heavy beard leans out, ragged and worn to the bone. He squints at the strangers on his step and rasps a rough question, asking who they are. The group stares back without a word, thrown by the sight of him. Belinda whispers that this broken man could barely last the night. Ghislain says it's the right place. The old man says nothing, his tired eyes half hidden under all that hair. He moves to shut the door, telling the noble to quit wasting his time. Ghislain calls out to wait. Ghislain stands tall in the doorway and names him Gillian, former captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries. The old man freezes, his one eye blowing wide the instant that name lands. Ghislain reaches out an open hand and tells him he has waited a long time for this. The name lands and the old knight Fergus flinches, repeating it back, the Ratatosk mercenaries. Only fighters who mastered nearly every weapon out there were ever let into that famous band. The company is long gone now, yet every knight across the continent still knows the name, and their captain is the ragged old man standing in the doorway, Gillian himself. Ghislain holds out a hand and tells him he traveled all this way just to meet him. The old man erupts, a blur of motion and killing intent bursting across the small room. The force rushes past Ghislain's face, clicks, and the young master doesn't move an inch. Fergus and the retainer freeze while Ghislain's eyes lock on, sharp and half wild. A thick hand snaps out as Ghislain snarls that this stranger already knows exactly who he is. The group drops into stance, blades ringing free, circling the hunched giant on the floor. Ghislain bares his teeth through the beard and demands they state their business. Belinda cuts in front of Ghislain with a dagger, warning that the old man has lost his mind. Ghislain says the name of the disease out loud, the eternal punishment. He tells Ghislain he knows the cure to the incurable illness his daughter is dying from. Then he asks, flat and calm, whether that finally gets the old man's attention. The disease opens with a burning fever, then the victim starts coughing up blood. Red blotches spread across the skin in blooming patches that never stop growing. The pain twists the patient into fits of agony, and that torment gave the sickness its name. Inside the weapon-choked shack, Ghislain kneels at a bloodied bed and screams. He cries out her name, Rachel, while Ghislain stands quiet at his back. In his past life, Ghislain went hunting for Ghislain to recruit him, but he arrived too late. By then, the man had thrown everything away and ended his own life the day his daughter died. Every coin he owned went into her treatment, and only the weapons on the walls were left. Rachel stirs on the bed and begs her father through the pain to just let her go. Ghislain pushes up a sleeve and says there's no time to waste, he'll begin the treatment now. A gloved hand clamps onto his shoulder and stops him cold before he takes a step. Belinda grips him tight and quietly tells the young master they should turn back. She warns that raw strength can't fix this, that even priests call it a punishment from the gods. Ghislain pulls free and says he can fix the girl, and Belinda calls after him, alarmed. He turns his head, blue eyes steady, and reminds her that she said she trusts him. Belinda falls silent, thrown off by how certain his face looks in that moment. Ghislain holds out a folded note and tells her to take it from his hand. From above, he orders her to buy every medicinal herb on that list and hurry back. Belinda scans the paper and stiffens, stunned by what he has written down. For wandering mercenaries with no home, knowledge like this is tied straight to survival. Ghislain had drilled that cure into memory, certain the method surfaces again later on. He still remembers every step of it, right down to the herbs laid out on the table. The only real hurdle was how brutally expensive all the ingredients turned out to be. He lifts the key piece, a glowing purple bloom people call the fairy's blessing. Ghislain chops the fairy's blessing and the herbs down fine across the cloth. He packs the mixture tight into a jar and pours distilled spirits over the top. He shakes the jar hard until it all blends, then sets it down to settle for a while. Seated at the table, he stirs in the last ingredients while the group watches from behind. He raises the finished vial of purple liquid right in front of Ghislain's weathered face. Ghislain presses it into the giant's hand and tells him to make her drink this. Ghislain tips the vial to Rachel's blood-streaked lips as she lies there. He cradles her head with one huge arm and pours the medicine down slow and careful. Rachel's breath rasps out, her face still buried under blood and swollen red marks. Then the blotches along her cheeks start to crack apart and drain of color. The redness bleeds out of her skin and her ragged breathing finally eases. The whole room goes dead still as everyone stares down at the girl, Belinda's breath caught. Fergus and Belinda lean closer, and the red spots are truly fading right in front of them. Ghislain clutches his daughter, shaking, barely able to believe the medicine actually worked. Ghislain rests a hand on the giant's back and says, "Just as expected, it works." Ghislain turns with tears in his good eye, choking out that not even divine power could save her. Ghislain explains a priest's blessing only boosts the body's own healing, which is no true cure. Ghislain's enormous hands tremble as the whole thing slowly sinks in. He grabs Ghislain by the arms and asks if his daughter can really be cured. Ghislain holds his stare and tells him in a couple of months he guarantees she will be well again, and the old man just gapes at him. The giant folds down and lowers his head all the way to the young man's feet. He says Ghislain clearly came all this way because he wants a favor of him. Ghislain holds out an open hand and admits all he has left is this worn-out body. He swears he'll be a dog or a slave, whatever the young master decides to command. Ghislain reaches down and says he wants no slave, only the captain of the Ratatosk. Ghislain breathes out slow at the sight of the young man's eyes. Ghislain's stare is the look of a man who still dares to dream. Instead of grabbing the hand, Ghislain reaches back and takes hold of his long braid. He swings a hatchet up and hacks the heavy matted braid clean off in one stroke. The thick rope of white hair drops and slaps against the floorboards. The party stands ready, Ghislain out front with a slim blade, Fergus and Belinda close behind. Fergus and Belinda stare, barely able to grasp how different the old man looks now. Ghislain rises tall again, blue mana pouring off a body that suddenly looks unbroken. The huge man paces the floorboards with heavy steps while Ghislain tracks every move. Ghislain asks whether anyone else traveled here or might come hunting the young master. Ghislain answers that it is only the people already standing in this room. The old man asks if anyone holds a grudge, and Ghislain admits he has enemies, with more coming. Gillian's fist closes hard around a spear as he mutters. In that case, he sweeps the weapon around fast, a blue arc trailing off the blade tip. The arc cracks toward a hooded figure by the wall, and red sparks burst on impact. Ghislain loops the roped spear in a wide sweep and starts reeling the intruder in. The strike lands in a blinding burst of white and blue light. The rope snaps taut and hauls a hooded assassin clean up off the ground. Gillian's hand clamps around the thrashing man, who chokes out a strangled gasp. He hoists the killer up by the collar and demands to know who sent him. The assassin struggles in the grip, stunned that he was ever caught at all. Ghislain dangles him one-handed and asks what to do, and Ghislain says he already knows the sender. Ghislain slides out a small blade and says he hated to use it on a day like this. As he steps forward, a massive hand lifts to stop him before he can. Ghislain meets his eyes and asks the young master to leave this one to him. The giant crushes the assassin in his fist, and the man barely gets out a cry. The body hits the floor, and the group closes in around it with Belinda at the front. Belinda watches, uneasy, wondering why her young master would want a man this ruthless. Ghislain stands calm as the giant sinks to one knee, blue mist curling off his frame. Ghislain speaks his lord's full name and swears to lay his life in Ghislain's hands from now on. Ghislain smirks and welcomes the old captain aboard, and his rebuilding plan just gained a living legend. A message reaches the Wildcat hideout over the water that one whole reconnaissance unit has been wiped out. 4 cloaked men freeze at the news, and one of them spits that the whole thing is foolish. A low voice cuts through the rain and orders every one of them to go quiet. The huge hooded figure at the center is Viego, the captain of the Wildcat traffickers. A subordinate apologizes and says Bernaf's intel swore Ghislain couldn't even find a scout unit, let alone kill one. Then he admits the worst part, that Ghislain has gone and joined Ghislain's group. The name lands, and Viego's masked face goes dead still. His hand shoots out and clamps the subordinate hard by the collar. Viego grins under the mask and demands to know if the man is truly certain. The choking subordinate swears he saw Ghislain himself with his own eyes. Viego's eye burns red as he calls out to Ghislain, his former captain, thrilled the man is finally moving. The lead carriage tears down the night road behind 2 galloping horses. Inside, Belinda's face sours and she mutters that it is suffocating in here. She gripes that Ghislain packed a whole armory like some arms dealer, and the old man just sits there in silence. Ghislain lazily says the extra wagon was bought for Rachel anyway, so the heavy load is fine. Behind them, the rear guard rolls along with Fergus and Ricardo up on the reins. The young master adds that Ghislain has a real use for every last blade, so they should bear with it. For now, the goal is to clear this rift, and the covered wagon rolls on through the dark. Belinda brings up the watcher they caught and figures Lady Amelia sent him, and Ghislain calls it almost certain. That worries her, and she warns this whole thing could turn into real trouble. The mask the watcher wore is the mark of the Wildcat Traffickers, a strong guild in Rayfold. Ghislain rolls the name around, already piecing together who these people are. Belinda explains their trade runs on smuggling and assassination, plus every other kind of filthy work. Worse, plenty of them are ex-mercenaries, which makes the guild a shadow army with real fighting strength. Ghislain asks how she knows so much when she only ever sat inside the castle, and Belinda just waves it off. She warns the traffickers never let go once they lock on, and Ghislain's jaw tightens at that. Then she softens and tells him not to worry, they will be fine, because, she says, they have Ghislain, who sits masked and ready right behind them. Out on the road, the covered wagon keeps rolling under a thin moon. The night holds still, then a rush of shapes closes in from the tree line. Blue mana suddenly erupts off both sides of the wagon at once. Up front, Ghislain's eyes snap wide and lock onto the dark. He launches off the wagon in a burst of pale energy, blade already drawn. Ghislain lands low and reads it at once. An ambush sprung straight out of the ground. The first attacker crashes down, and Ghislain meets the strike head on. Blades cross and scrape as he turns the blow cleanly aside. A curved edge whips past and opens a thin line of blood on him. He drives his heavy axe down through the tangle of bodies. The blade comes back up, chipped and dripping red. Black smoke bursts up all around the wagon in the chaos. Inside the haze, 2 figures trade blows, one axe trailing pale mana. Ghislain perches back on the wagon, hatchet ready, scanning the field below. The group realizes it is a trap, and a panicked voice yells they will be crushed at this rate. The horses rear hard as Ghislain grips a long spear and steadies himself. The whole ambush tightens around the lone wagon on the narrow pass. Ghislain stays calm and mutters that this ambush is exactly what he expected. Masked assassins pour out of the dark, daggers first, straight at the wagon. Then Viego's voice rolls in, calling out the former captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries. Ghislain's scarred face hardens, and he shoots back only a blank, puzzled look. Viego steps out with his men and brands Ghislain a coward who scrapped a whole company over his daughter. Ghislain only crouches by the wheel and says he has no clue what the man means. From above, Viego's unit fans out as he snarls that Ghislain wrecked the life he wanted and asks if the old man has gone senile. Ghislain holds dead silent and gives him absolutely nothing. Viego takes it as playing dumb and swears he will force the old man to remember him. He screams for his men to kill them and the assassins surge in with drawn blades. Ghislain offers to jump in, but Ghislain says this one is personal and tells him to hang back. Ghislain lifts his hatchet as clawed daggers rain down, telling them he can manage alone. He carves the first wave apart before it even lands. One assassin spits a curse at the old man as the blade tears through him. Ghislain spins through the pack with a straight dagger flashing in his free hand. His curved blade rips an attacker wide open in a spray of red. Another one lunges in and gets cut down mid-step. Steel locks against steel as his mana flares bright blue. Ghislain seizes the nearest attacker and tears straight through the guard. From the edge, Viego admits Ghislain is every bit as strong as before, but there is a catch. He splits his forces into two groups and orders them to hit Ghislain from both sides. Ghislain only grunts, swings up onto the white horse, and grabs the reins. The assassins panic the moment he climbs into the saddle. He wheels the horse around and swings the hatchet wide with a rope trailing. Seen from above, Ghislain looks tiny as he charges clean through the pack on horseback. He barrels straight and swinging, his axe wrapped in blue mana. Ghislain drives the mount through the center and drops a man in a burst of blood. The assassins scramble back, unable to reach him, and a leader screams to aim for the horse instead. Ghislain feels the shift coming and hauls the reins hard to one side. He whirls a long rope over his head and sweeps the whole ring of them back. Tucked in the wagon, Ghislain and Belinda flinch as a stray strike nearly reaches them. A masked killer drops straight down out of the night sky at Ghislain. The attacker dives in low with a hooked blade leading. Ghislain twists to block and sparks burst off the clash. It is Viego himself, snarling that Ghislain should at least not stand in the way of his work. His red eye flares as he vows to make certain Ghislain dies right here. Viego lunges with the dagger and Ghislain snaps up a small round shield to catch it. The edge grazes him and draws blood, yet he keeps his footing. Ghislain shifts his weight and lines up the counter, shield braced and mana blazing. He states flat out that he is not the Ratatosk captain anymore. He rams the guard into Viego and throws the strike off in a shower of sparks. Viego jolts, thrown by the raw force behind the shove. The hit launches him clean backward off his feet. From the dirt he spits that Ghislain honestly claims he is not the captain. Viego loses it and demands to know who the man is, then, if not that. Ghislain lifts the mana-wrapped hatchet and says he threw his whole past away. He stands tall in the blue glow and calls himself nothing, now but young Lord Ghislain's man. Viego's red eye splits wide and he chokes out a furious "You!" He hurls himself down with the dagger, screaming he will kill Ghislain no matter the cost. Rain hammers the night road and a hard clash rings out as steel meets steel in the dark. Ghislain and Viego collide out in the open, blades scraping in a burst of white sparks. Viego drives his heavy blade down, and Ghislain catches it flat on his round shield. Viego tells him the mercenary company fell apart the moment Ghislain walked away. He spits that he lost his whole purpose and clawed out a shameful living just to eat. Ghislain just stares him down behind the mask, giving back nothing but silence. The two crash together again, blades locking as their boots skid across the wet ground. Ghislain sweeps a wide arc of blue mana, and Viego ducks low under the swing. Viego slides through the dark in a fast streak, staying just clear of the edge. Viego rams straight into Ghislain, and the two lock up, shoving chest to chest. Ghislain braces flat behind his shield, and Viego mutters about that stubborn guard. Viego leans in close and says the name Ghislain slow, like it still stings him. He says he was ready to spend his whole life making Ratatosk the best in history, only for Ghislain to end up a spoiled noble's pawn. Viego's red eye flares behind the mask as he swears he will never forgive this. Ghislain lunges in fast, his blade trailing sharp lines of blue light. He whips the shield around and turns the next strike aside with another blue curve. A knife gets knocked loose and punches into the dirt, its edge smeared red. Ghislain and Viego slam together once more, weapons grinding between them. Viego leaps in with metal claws leading, and Ghislain drops into a low stance. Their weapons meet dead center, and a bright spark bursts off the impact. Viego grins wide under the mask, telling Ghislain he was fearsome as a captain. The two split in a flash of light as Viego brands that old power long gone. While Ghislain wasted years curing his daughter, Viego says he trained through endless battles. Ghislain looks up as Viego dives, screaming that the old man is no match for him now. Viego rakes his clawed gauntlet straight down at Ghislain's head. Ghislain throws the shield up, and the claws screech across it in a spray of sparks. The claws tear past the guard and rip Ghislain's shirt open across the chest. Ghislain flinches with blood on him as Viego closes in with the dagger again. Viego drops on him from above, but Ghislain answers with a hard blue swing. Viego clamps onto him and roars that it is finally over for Ghislain. A hand wrapped in blue mana snaps shut and catches Viego's dagger blade bare. Ghislain holds the blade steady and calmly asks if this is the root of Viego's revenge. Viego freezes, stunned that Ghislain had been hiding his real strength this whole time. Ghislain flicks the dagger away and it snaps off his palm in a white flash. The blow sends Viego flying as a spike of pale energy tears up from below. Viego crashes into a huge tree and folds over at its roots in the dust. Ghislain walks toward him, hatchet in hand, and says he does not understand. Viego lifts a shaking gauntlet as Ghislain notes he had plenty of chances for revenge. Ghislain asks him flat out why he never came to finish him off sooner. Viego chuckles that Ghislain only knows half the story, and the old man goes still. Viego says he already went to the place Ghislain used to live and found no Rathatos captain there. A memory shows a frail old man slumped alone, the one Viego judged not worth killing. Viego's red eye burns as he demands to know where the Ghislain he admired vanished to. Ghislain holds his gaze without a word, letting the question hang between them. Ghislain points at a sword stuck in the dirt and tells Viego to raise his weapon. He grips the hilt and admits he too is a man bound to another's will. Ghislain lifts a blade high and says that for this one moment he will honor his old comrade. His fierce eyes lock forward as he claims the title of Rathatos captain once more. Viego lowers his head and breathes out a quiet yes. Viego tightens his grip on the dagger and grins that now they are finally talking. The two smash together, Viego's red eye blazing as mana explodes at the center. Viego throws his head back and howls that this is exactly what he wished for. Their blades cross in a wide clash, sparks blowing out on every side. Ghislain carves a long white slash and Viego is driven back across the field. With the shield set, Ghislain sweeps another cut straight at Viego's guard. Blue mana flares as Ghislain drives a long thrust deep into Viego's defense. Ghislain whirls a huge crescent of white light around at the reeling captain. The two lock face to face, Viego bloodied under the mask as red fire glows below. Ghislain's strike lands clean, splitting blood across Viego's cracked mask. One more massive white sweep throws Viego reeling back into the dust. Ghislain hauls the hatchet high overhead and brings it roaring down on Viego. Viego's bloodied face fills the frame as Ghislain names the 5th unit commander of Rathatos. Ghislain says it plain at last, the name Viego Velanos. The final blow crunches home against Viego's shattered mask. A bloody dagger lies in the dirt beside Viego, sprawled and unmoving. Viego's hand goes limp on the red ground, and the fight is finally done. Ghislain stands tall over the fallen, breathing hard and splattered with blood. As Ghislain turns, Ghislain calls out to him with a simple good work. Belinda eyes the bodies and says selling their gear could pull in a nice pile of gold. Ghislain dips his head and apologizes for the delay, and Ghislain waves it off. Ghislain studies him and thinks the old man is even sharper than the legends he grew up on. A memory shows Ghislain as the Mercenary King, his sword raised before a huge crowd. Ghislain asks Ghislain whether he knew the man he just cut down. Ghislain looks at his bloody blade and quietly answers as Ghislain lifts his eyes to the moon and says the man was his old comrade. Ghislain turns the words over and mutters old comrade under his breath. Ghislain leans back and wonders how his own old friends are living long before they ever met him. Ghislain plans to recruit them someday, then floats Belinda's idea to strip the loot, and Ghislain flatly reminds them he is nobody's errand boy. 2 days later, a lone wagon rolls up a winding road toward a castle on the hill. The three ride in together, and a tired voice sighs that they finally reach Perdium. Ghislain sits with his arms crossed and answers that yes, this is the place. The castle looms ahead as Ghislain admits it feels good to have a home waiting. Ghislain watches quietly from the reins, saying nothing at all. Ghislain asks Gillian how he likes the land, and Gillian stiffly calls it great, but Ghislain cuts him off and calls the place a complete mess. He points out crumbling houses and bare fields left fallow after every farmer got drafted. Ghislain says the Northern Barbarian Wars left Perdium far worse than expected, and Belinda quietly notes he never knew this land so well before. Ghislain tells Gillian he will fix all of it, which is why he needs his strength. The castle spreads out below as Ghislain vows to tear down everything tied to Duke Delphine and revive the land. Ghislain's pale eyes narrow with cold resolve above the wagon rail. The wagon clatters through a stone gate and down into the streets of the town. Belinda suddenly grabs his attention and points ahead down the lane, and Ghislain glances over. Ghislain's eye snaps wide, locked on a sight he clearly did not expect. A grand white castle rises over festival banners, and a shape beside it locks his gaze. Down the street, a fur-cloaked man with a wolf crest stands, and Ghislain breathes one word: father. Ghislain is home at Perdium Castle, dropped into a tense war council over cutting their forces. His father's advisors warn that trimming the army again leaves the front lines wide open. The house that slashed their funding is now stockpiling food and massing soldiers for war. Others say they must rebuild the garrison the orcs wrecked, so the Knight Order gets cut. Ghislain sits through it, and to him this endless bickering feels same old. Running the military talk is the Perdium Knight Captain Randolph. The timeline feels strange to Ghislain, months as young lord, but decades as the Mercenary King. Then a voice welcomes him back. Ghislain greets his father, Count Zwalter, who just grunts a flat As a boy, he never liked his father, always too strict and too serious. But now, with older eyes, Ghislain sees what he used to miss. The exhaustion his father carries as lord of this land, a weight that never lets up. The Count notes Ghislain was gone from the castle a whole week. Ghislain answers plainly that he went to visit the Rayfolds. His father hopes the boy caused no trouble. Ghislain sips his tea and says he did not. The treasurer, Albert, heard the young lord won a duel against Cain and pocketed money. Albert leans in with a suspicious squint and asks if he went to gamble. Ghislain says no, only business with a woman named Amelia. Privately he scoffs, that was investing. The administrator, Holmern, lectures that a future lord of Perdium must think before acting. His father ends it with a firm that is enough, and every advisor clams up. Then the Count says he heard the boy stirred up good trouble while away. He heard Ghislain executed 2 men, Jamal and Philip, for trying to sell off a girl named Elena. Ghislain pictures the 2 smug faces and mutters, "Ah, those guys." Randolph insists the young lord could not have done it, betting the traitors killed each other. Ghislain reads him. Randolph's knights died at his hands, so he wants a softer story. Ghislain shrugs. Randolph puffs up with a smug, "Humph, I knew it," buying the easier version. Then his father drops 2 words nobody saw coming. Great job. Ghislain's eye goes wide. The Count says he does not care how it happened, only that Elena is alive. That lands hard, the first compliment Ghislain has ever pulled from his father. Ghislain pushes his luck and asks for one favor. The Count raises a brow, a request. Holmern warns that if this is about money for a reward, he is shutting it down now. Randolph rants the kid torched the gate to grill a warhorse and melted the armor for a legendary sword. Ghislain shrugs. Sounds like a lot. Ghislain cuts in and says he wants one thing, permission. The Count echoes it. Permission. Then he drops it. He wants to pioneer the Forest of Beasts, and the whole council freezes. Ghislain says it dead serious, not a trace of a joke on his face. And the answer comes back short and cold. Dad said no. Turns out he is telling Gillian and Belinda all this. His father shouted him down, and Gillian agrees the forest is worthless and full of monsters. Ghislain confirms Gillian heard the plan, opening the forest with funds from the Rayfold daughter. Gillian lays out the name. The Forest of Death, where no one walks out alive, so nobody knows it. Even far regions fear it. Ghislain admits there is nothing to gain in there on the surface. Then he trails off. Then he claps. Shall we start? Belinda panics. You never got permission and still want to go. He smirks that he never needed permission, he only asked to be polite. Belinda asks what is out there that has him so obsessed. Ghislain says he will explain later. Saying it aloud would only cause trouble. Cracking that forest open means a massive payout, because near the entrance, there is a giant vein of runestone buried in the ground, just waiting. Runestone is soaked in raw mana, an insanely rare mineral mages lose their minds over. The stuff goes into every kind of magic gear, from barriers to enchanted scrolls. Alchemy, magic research, you name it. If it runs on mana, runestone is part of it. In his past life, Duke Delphine found this vein first. This time, Ghislain alone knows it is there. Belinda's eyes go wide, thrown by what he is cooking up. Gillian agrees to follow the plan. Ghislain has Belinda hire 200 mercenaries from the guild, and she balks at the cost. The old man is not sold. Mercenaries are rough and unruly, hard to leash and quick to turn on a paymaster. Ghislain agrees, so the two will handpick the useful ones themselves. Gillian asks what he means. He names his target, the sharpest small outfit in the north. Gillian's face shifts at once. Gillian's eyes narrow. "Don't tell me," he mutters. "You mean those crazy dogs? Their crest is a three-headed hound with a nasty name, skilled but quick to flip when things go south." Ghislain names them without blinking, the Cerberus mercenaries. The two ride for the camp, and Ghislain grins. Time to leash those crazy dogs. Out at the edge of Zimber territory, the Cerberus camp sprawls with tents and rowdy fighters. Through a spyglass, a lookout watches the pair climb the mountain path. He calls out, "Hey, they are here." Sure, the poor fools have no clue what waits. Sizing up Ghislain through the lens, he smirks that the boy looks like a pampered noble brat. He is already counting the gold he could squeeze when a dark blur cuts through the air. The mercs freeze mid-laugh. One of their own just dropped, and nobody saw it happen. It is Gillian, the old warrior leaping clean over the crowd, already mid-swing. A mercenary reels back, screaming, cursing Gillian, demanding to know what he is doing. Gillian answers with one sweep of white energy that tears straight down through the pack. Bodies hit the dirt bloody, and the whole camp finally clocks the danger. Through the rain, the Cerberus fighters grab weapons, shouting, "Who is that? Prepare for battle." One barks the intruder lost his mind. That high birth is no excuse to charge in this reckless. A tall merc in a cap steps up, spiked flail and curved blade in hand, grinning they die here. The capped fighter's grin holds, until his eyes catch a lone rider coming up the path. Ghislain rides into the camp on a white horse, calm as anything, hooves pounding. He does not flinch. He looks down and says, "Shut it and bring me your captain," strolling into a camp of killers with no clue he is about to leash them all. Ghislain sits calm on his horse in the Cerberus camp and asks who the captain is. His face fills the panel, cocky and bored, like he already owns the ground here. A hooded merc with gray hair grins under his bandana and lets out a low hey-hey. He calls the boy a noble brat gone mad, a heavy chain coiled around his glove. The chain fighter grips the links and says it is time the brat learned something. He whips the flail forward, yelling about responsibility, spiked ball flying at Ghislain. Ghislain keeps his back turned as the spiked ball closes fast on his head. A blade stabs straight into the swinging chain and stops it dead, sparks flying. It is Gillian, the old warrior, gripping the caught chain while Ghislain stays calm. Two of the mercs freeze, eyes wide, refusing to believe what they just watched. One of them shouts that the old man jammed his sword right into a moving chain. The heavy ball drops and thuds into the dirt, every bit of its force gone. Ghislain watches and says words were never going to reach men like these. He tells Gillian to work them over, but leave every last one of them breathing. Gillian answers understood and moves, blade and chain already swinging wide. His weapon smashes into the chain fighter and rips the whole attack apart. The old man leaps in with a hooked blade and hauls the chain fighter down. Gillian whirls through the pack, his chain lashing out in a long arc. One merc takes the full hit and flies back screaming, blood in the air. The crew charges yelling they will not go soft on a noble, and Gillian drops one mid-run. He loops his chain around the next sword and yanks two armored mercs off balance. Gillian turns with his blade and keeps cutting a path through the crowd. The dust settles on a yard full of downed fighters, the old man still standing. Gillian glares out, one eye lit up, not even winded from all the work. Two masked mercs stumble back bloodied, finally clocking how outmatched they are. Ghislain rides up beside Gillian and tells the small fry to move and bring the captain. His face sets hard, done wasting time on the leftovers of the camp. A new voice grumbles about being woken up and asks what all the commotion is. The armored soldiers snap to attention, spears rattling as their boss steps out. He names himself Kaor, captain of the Cerberus mercenaries, boots crunching forward. Kaor steps into full view, lean and cut, red hair spiked, asking why the boy wants him. Ghislain says he came to hand the crew a job, and Kaor asks what client beats up his men. Kaor leans in and asks if a noble should not know a little more about manners. Ghislain says this is just his way of saying hello, the fastest way to tame the crew. Kaor grins at the word tame and tells him fine, spit out whatever job he came with. The two sit across a rough table, the whole crew ringed around them in the tent. Ghislain names the Forest of Beasts and says he wants them to pioneer it for him. He holds Kaor's stare, dead serious about the monster-filled forest. The soldiers mutter about that forest of monsters sitting right by Perdium territory. Kaor smirks and asks what kind of man walks in wanting to poke a forest like that. Ghislain gives his name plainly, the young lord of Perdium, coat hanging off his shoulders. Kaor sits back as the name lands, his men trading looks behind him. The whole tent bursts out laughing that the crazy noble from the rumors is really him. Kaor waves it all off and says he has heard more than enough from the greenhouse kid. He calls the talk over, and a soldier levels a longsword straight at Ghislain. Ghislain and Gillian sit still under the blades, while Kaor asks if the boy is scared. Kaor's face hardens, waiting to finally watch the noble sweat a little. Ghislain just smirks and says their famous skill is looking like a total hoax. Kaor's boot slams down and cracks the floorboard as his temper starts to slip. Kaor warns him not to push it, since mercs never take a job that does not pay. Ghislain leans back and says it is always the weak ones who reach for excuses. Kaor goes quiet, jaw tight, the easy grin finally gone from his face. He says the mood is dead, the brat is not worth killing, so pay up and get lost. Ghislain refuses and calls for Amoriana's recognition against the captain. He sits forward, hands on his knees, letting the name sink into the room. The soldiers jolt at the words, the whole tent going stiff around the table. Kaor narrows his eyes and asks if the boy even knows what he just named. Ghislain answers of course he does, not one flicker of doubt on him. It is an old mercenary bet where both fighters use one dagger and no mana. Their arms get tied together, and stepping outside the small circle counts as a loss. That traps both men in a brutal life or death scramble with almost no room. Often even the winner walks away dead, and the loser must obey every word. Put plainly, the loser becomes the winner's dog from then on. Ghislain tilts his head and asks Kaor how that little deal sounds to him. Gillian stares. Stunned, his young lord even knows a tradition no merc can refuse. Kaor's mouth curls into a slow grin as the challenge lands exactly right. He turns to his crew and says the bold little noble wants recognition their way. His eyes flash red as he tells the boys to help the kid out a little. Two wrists get lashed together with a thick rope, pulled tight and knotted. Ghislain and Kaor stand bound inside the circle, daggers out, Gillian watching close. The crew screams for their captain to gut the insolent noble on the spot. Kaor says the boy clearly learned this trick and now cannot back out of it. The two snap toward each other, tied arms straining, daggers driving in. Kaor grins that he has already survived this exact duel 5 whole times. He locks the boy's wrist and laughs, certain the count settles all of it. A voice echoes 5 times as the two lock arms in a shaking deadlock. Ghislain leans in calm and says he has run this over 400 times, and Kaor's face finally breaks. Ghislain stays locked with Kaor, wrists roped together, and throws the captain's proud 5 times right back at him. His face fills the panel, calm and cocky, as he says he has run this duel over 400 times. One sharp blue eye stares back, dead calm, holding zero doubt about the count. Kaor's grin splits wide, teeth bared, and the fight kicks off right there. Ghislain lunges first, blade lit blue, and grabs a fistful of the captain's hair. Ghislain hauls his tied arm up and drives the dagger down at Kaor's skull. His eyes lock in hard while the captain's face snaps up to meet the swing. The two blades scrape together as both men twist inside the tiny circle. Kaor answers with a flurry of fists, hammering at the young lord's ribs and arms. They trade fast, arms tangled by the rope, neither one giving ground. The captain lands a heavy punch flush in Ghislain's chest, sparks flying off the hit. Kaor clamps an arm around the young lord's neck and drags him in close. The two wrench against the rope, daggers hunting for any open angle. Kaor cracks an elbow toward Ghislain's jaw and forces him back a step. The captain rams a knee into the noble's gut and stabs downward at the same time. Ghislain twists away from the blade, saying nothing, eyes still ice cold. Kaor sneers that nobody clears Moriana's recognition 100 times, calling the whole claim a bluff. He throws a brutal straight punch and tells the kid to at least make the lie look real. The whole crew rings the circle, screaming that the noble lost his momentum and to kill him. Off to the side, Gillian watches with one eye glowing, jaw tight under his beard. The old warrior reads it as a losing battle, the circle too small to move and mana forbidden. From above, the size gap is obvious, and the roped wrists leave Ghislain barely able to block. Kaor towers with every chance to seize control, while the young lord stays pinned on defense. The daggers keep clashing, and the fight tilts closer to the edge with each exchange. The old warrior leans forward, set to step in the second things turn truly deadly. His hand settles on the axe strapped across his back, waiting for the word. Back in the ring, Ghislain hooks his tied arm around Kaor and yanks him off balance. He snaps a knee upward and the captain jolts back with a red flash of impact. Ghislain grabs hold again and wrenches the bigger man around by the arm. The young lord's eyes narrow as Kaor's boot slams straight into his raised guard. Ghislain feels the blows stacking up with no mana to soften them, and Kaor taunts that he already looks pale. The captain roars that Ghislain Perdium looks pathetic, trying to resist his raw strength. Kaor slashes down and admits the noble has guts, then says that is exactly where it ends. His grin sharpens as he claims he can already see straight through the whole plan. Kaor reads the strategy aloud that the young lord deflects the blade and eats smaller hits on his body. But with mana banned in Moriana's recognition, every absorbed blow keeps piling up. Kaor points to the strain building in Ghislain's legs from soaking all that damage. He says it already shows on the noble's face and dares him to let the struggle show. The captain's mouth twists into a hungry grin, calling this exact part the fun of it. Ghislain glances back over his shoulder, tied hands gripped tight, Kaor's eyes fixed hard above him. Kaor's arm coils and fires the dagger forward in one hard straight thrust. The blade grazes past Ghislain as a blue flash marks another close hit. Kaor swings again over the guard while the young lord ducks low under it. Ghislain throws up his blade and catches the strike, sparks bursting off the clash. Kaor drives another slash in and Ghislain bends under it, steel scraping past his head. The captain's arm hammers down and the young lord folds his body away from it. Kaor grits his teeth, pouring more weight behind every single swing now. One blow finally crashes through and a blue burst lights up the point of contact. Ghislain rocks back with his shirt torn open and blood streaked across his chest. Kaor's eyes flare as he decides the noble is finished and the duel is done. He lifts the dagger high over his head and flatly tells Ghislain to die. The captain looms with the blade cocked back, staring down at the smaller fighter. The ringed soldiers lean in with a hungry cheer, certain the kill has arrived. Ghislain shouts for his young lord, but Ghislain's mouth curls into a slow smirk. Kaor's dagger comes screaming down toward the crouched noble's skull. Ghislain drops into a low stance and slips the blade past by a hair. Kaor's eyes go wide. Stunned, the kid dodged from a position that cramped. From down low, Ghislain sweeps in and clips the captain with a sharp counter. He drives a kick upward and opens a bleeding gash across Kaor's bare chest. Kaor freezes, fresh cuts leaking down his ribs, his teal eyes blown wide. The soldiers gasp and even Ghislain's brow lifts at the sudden turn. Kaor stabs down hard, and the young lord bends away from the arc. Ghislain slides under the next swing and stays glued to the captain's blind side. Another cut opens across Kaor's torso, and the crew screams that their captain got hit again. The two grind on inside the ring while the whole company presses in around them. The soldiers beg their captain to show what a real mercenary is made of, and Ghislain just stares. Kaor lunges in bleeding, and the two crash together, arms strained by the rope. The captain's blade whips across as he grits through the pain twisting his face. Ghislain keeps his own blade raised and level, his expression flat and calm. The two smash face to face, blood on Kaor, the young lord steady against him. Ghislain twists his roped hand and forces his dagger up into the gap. He punches the blade into Kaor's forearm, and the captain grunts, then roars in pain. Kaor bellows and shoves back with everything he has left. The captain demands to know what happened, since the brat could barely take his strength before. Ghislain just looks back at him, quiet and unbothered by the question. Off to the side, Ghislain breathes out that he finally sees what the young lord is doing. Swinging with full power stiffened Kaor's muscles, so Ghislain never fought that force head on. Instead, the young lord relaxed and redirected the captain's momentum, beating the size gap with flow. Ghislain's hand tightens on his axe, quietly stunned by the read. The crew yells at their captain to quit clowning, while Kaor stands there bloodied and breathing hard. Ghislain tells him his resolve is rare, since most men would break the rules and reach for mana. Kaor answers that he earned his captain's seat this exact way, and breaking the rules ends a mercenary's career. The young lord's mouth tugs into a grin, and he says he likes that answer a lot. Kaor admits that head to head he might be a touch outmatched now, but he is far from done. His eye flares as he snarls that there is more than one way to win this duel. Kaor seizes the young lord as the other rule surfaces. 1 foot outside the circle means instant defeat. He hurls Ghislain toward the boundary, betting that skill counts for nothing past the line. Kaor grips tight and promises that one big throw drops the noble on the ground outside the ring. The captain's bloodied face splits into a grin as he shouts that he wins. A lone hand clamps down on the dagger, knuckles white around the worn grip. Kaor wraps him up and starts to sling the young lord toward the edge. Ghislain leaves the ground, flipping through the air with the rope still binding their wrists. Kaor whips him fully overhead, sending the noble upside down in a wide arc. Their tied hands lock together in a hard grip, a white flash bursting at the knot. Kaor's arm snaps to full stretch, but the young lord catches the momentum mid-flight. Ghislain rides the throw around and drags Kaor back down with him instead. He spikes the captain headfirst toward the dirt inside the circle, blade leading the fall. The company stares as their captain crashes down in the middle of the ring. The soldiers stammer that their captain is finished, that the duel has to be over now. Ghislain lifts his head, calm as ever, and tells Kaor plainly that he wins. Kaor rasps out the question, demanding to know who carries this level of skill. Ghislain's blue eye narrows as he says he dislikes the tone and that Kaor is talking to his master now. He hauls the captain up by the rope and swings the big body around one more time. Kaor snaps that the fight is already finished and asks what more the noble even wants. Ghislain corrects him coldly, since Kaor has not been thrown clear of the circle just yet. He cocks his fist back and says he is about to discipline his brand new subordinate right here in the ring. Ghislain stands over the wrecked captain, calm and cold, and says he will discipline his subordinate now. He drives a brutal slam down, and blood bursts across the ring in a wide red spray. The whole company recoils as Kaor crashes headfirst into the dirt inside the circle. Kaor screams for him to wait, choking that the rules end things once a fighter steps out of the ring. His busted face twists while he asks if the young lord plans to honor rules on a real battlefield too. Ghislain lifts the captain by the rope as Kaor spits that no real noble acts like this. Ghislain tells him flatly that a subordinate does not talk back to his master. His fist smashes into Kaor's face while the captain chokes out that he is a lunatic. Ghislain rains punch after punch on the roped captain, blood flying off each strike. The soldiers mutter that the bet is already over and wonder if this beating is even allowed. Kaor howls for it to stop as another blow crushes into his bloody face. Ghislain keeps the captain locked in close and hammers him without a single pause. He holds Kaor up in the dark and reminds him he still has not left the circle. Kaor's swollen face rocks back, one eye glazed over, barely hanging on now. The mercenaries panic and start yelling for someone to rush in and kill this guy. A few soldiers grab their weapons and shout to move, ready to swarm the ring. Gillian's axe swings out into their path and freezes the whole crowd cold. The old warrior warns them plainly that anyone who blocks the discipline gets killed. His axe shoves the front rank back, and the soldiers stumble away from the edge. Back in the ring, Kaor's face is a bloody ruin, both eyes rolled pale. The captain drools and sways, his head lolling from the endless punishment. Ghislain lifts that beaten head and asks him coldly whether he is done yet. Kaor lets out a broken laugh as the young lord's fist comes flying at his face again. The captain thinks back, remembering that every noble he ever met was nothing but a loser. His mind drifts even as another hit rattles his skull to the side. He pictures the arrogant nobles he used to shake down, each one a coward the moment he pushed. Kaor remembers looming over them while they knelt, robbing their pockets for the fun of it. Gold coins spill through the memory, the reward that made the whole game worth playing. That is how he earned his name, the mad dog with a three-headed beast at his back. But now the same man kneels broken, wondering how a noble brat is beating him down. Around the ring, the soldiers cry out for their captain, sure he will die at this rate. Ghislain grips the ruined arm high and asks the crowd if this is finally enough. He barks at them to quit standing around and bring water and bandages. The young lord adds that their captain bleeds out fast if they keep dragging their feet. The soldiers jolt upright and snap to attention at the order. One mercenary bolts off at once, shouting back that he understands. Gillian stares in silence while the roped arm hangs there between the two of them. The old warrior's eyes narrow, watching wild mercenaries obey a young lord's command. Ghislain points the way while the soldiers scramble in carrying supplies. In a world where mercenaries trust their fists over any law, one lesson stuck hard. A blue-eyed beast spirit rears up behind the young lord as he shows them who the boss is. Later, Kaor sits bandaged at a rough table with a contract laid out in front of him. Ghislain points down at the paper and tells the captain plainly to sign it. Kaor stares at the document in silence, his jaw clenched tight. From above, Ghislain stands guard while the captain clicks his tongue in disgust. Ghislain taps the exact line and tells him to put his name right here. His cold eye flares as Kaor nervously repeats the question back to him. The captain catches himself and forces out that he looks forward to working together. Ghislain says good, then clamps a hand over the captain's face with a hard shove. From overhead, he declares the two of them family, while Kaor grunts under the grip. The young lord smiles and tells the captain he looks forward to working with him too. A few days later, a lone rider heads toward the castle on the outskirts of Perdium land. A crowd of hired mercenaries waits with spears and shields near the tree line. Two of them yawn and grumble about being called out this early, before any lunch. A bald mercenary leans on his shield and passes a rumor that their employer is Perdium's young lord. An eye-patched mercenary grins that a noble brat should make this an easy job. A huge man claps for attention and calls the whole group to listen up. Gordon flexes his massive chest and says a brat employer needs a proper representative. The mercenaries recognize him and mutter his name, Gordon the Muscle. Gordon grins that it is him, praising the crowd for scheming to get paid without working. He warns that unless they unite their voices, they will never squeeze out a good reward. The others ask his plan, and Gordon answers that the brat just needs to learn his limits. He promises to lean on the employer as the rep, then holds out a bag for everyone's cut. Coins rain into Gordon's bag while the mercenaries cheer about how reliable he is. Someone suddenly shouts that a rider is coming up the road straight at them. Far off, the lone horseman rides down from the castle through the misty hills. The rider draws closer, holding a steady pace along the dusty trail. The mercenaries squint and wonder aloud if the employer really showed up all alone. Gordon flexes again and tells everyone to line up and set a scary mood for him. The big man cracks his hands together, itching to teach the brat how tough the real world is. Down the forest road, the lone rider keeps coming straight toward the waiting crowd. Ghislain rides in flanked by Ghislain and Kaor, a column of dog-helmed cavalry at their backs. Gordon and a mercenary go pale, recognizing the Cerberus company by their dog snout helmets. The crowd stares at Kaor and wonders what the brat did to make those crazy dogs follow him. The riders pull to a halt right in front of Gordon and his two frozen frontmen. Ghislain looks down from the saddle without a word, his eyes fixed on the rep. He asks straight out if this giant is the representative, and Gordon stammers a yes. Ghislain leans down and asks the sweating man for his name. Gordon forces out that he goes by Gordon the Muscle. Ghislain repeats the title back at him, flat and far from impressed. He flicks the huge man aside while riding past and calls it a cool name as Gordon Buckles. Gordon freezes in shock while the young lord names himself as Ghislain Perdium. Ghislain turns his back and orders Gordon to gather every last mercenary at once. He glances back with a sharp grin and declares they will now pioneer the Forest of Beasts. Dawn breaks over the thick, misty tree line of the Forest of Beasts. Down at the camp, Ghislain stands with Belinda beside the finished tents. Every preparation for pioneering the forest is finally complete. Workers hammer and haul, raising the expedition's temporary base. More crews drag in supplies while the whole camp scrambles to load up. Ghislain looks down from a rise at a huge column of armored troops below. He turns to Belinda and asks her to run the head count one more time. She counts the 148 mercenaries hired through the office. Then she adds the 41 Cerberus fighters Ghislain brought along. The whole force now totals 192, and Ghislain asks if she warned Scovin. Belinda says Scovin, who commands the forest post, is quietly slipping them past unseen. That backing settles Ghislain, who mutters the arrangement is reassuring. He faces the ranks and shouts for every man to line up. Ghislain points ahead and names the Forest of Beasts as the land they will pioneer. He warns of monsters and hidden dangers worse than they can picture, and swears he will conquer it. 3 mercenaries panic, blurting that nobody warned them the target was the Forest of Beasts. Belinda snaps and half draws her blade. Furious, they cut off the young master, while Ghislain stays silent. Ghislain offers a way out, saying quitters may leave now, then promises triple pay if the mission succeeds. The mercenaries perk right up, and one shouts that triple pay suddenly sounds appealing. Belinda hisses that they already blew every coin on preparations, but he calls it a morale boost. Rune crystals glint in the rock, the payout Ghislain plans to dig out of this forest. Ghislain turns to Belinda and asks if she still trusts him. She sighs, eyes shut, and admits she has no real choice but to follow. 2 veterans chuckle, half amazed he would dangle triple pay, sure their boss always has a plan. Someone bellows for the whole Forest of Beasts expedition team to move out. Ghislain raises his fist above his cloak and gives the order to march. Deep in the woods, a lone figure works at the foot of a massive twisted tree. A blade swings hard and bites into the trunk with a heavy crack. From overhead, the whole team hacks down trees and drags logs across the clearing. Ghislain watches from below as a tall tree groans and topples near him. Two of his men clear a fresh stump while the felling keeps rolling on. Light finally breaks through the canopy, and Ghislain welcomes the opening. He throws out his hand and orders the crews to keep clearing this way and loosen the stumps. Ghislain recalls a Delphine journal he seized in his past life, one that mapped this vast forest, though right now only money matters to him. On the map, a red arrow points straight at a vein of glowing runestones. Perched on a log, Ghislain figures this wealth could break the plot circling House Perdium. One of the men scoffs that even their employer is pitching in with the labor now. Two mercenaries hauling a log sneer that his noble act is pure show. Belinda whips around and barks at them to quit gossiping and work faster, but they wave her off. Her jaw tightens, still stewing over how the men keep mocking him. She confronts Ghislain, asking why he hired hands only to labor beside them and lose their respect. Ghislain shrugs it off, saying more hands finish the job faster, and lingering here helps nobody. Belinda squints and mutters that he always talks like he knows the outcome, and Ghislain goes quiet. Two veterans smirk that the boss even has a woman fussing over him, while one jokes he walked into this hell himself. The old veteran suddenly locks the younger one in a headlock and yanks him back. The pair scuffle behind them while Ghislain and Belinda glance back at the racket. Ghislain faces forward again, thinking that so far the whole march has run smoothly. He never grasped why Delphine chose this exact place, yet their journal handed him the resource maps and the monster's habits. Two mercenaries eye a cart piled with lanterns, baffled why he packed hundreds of them. From the rise, Ghislain watches them saw through a huge trunk, uneasy that not one danger has appeared. He glances over his shoulder and tells the whole line not to drop their guard. Ahead, the forest thickens into a black tangle, with faint red points glinting in the dark. Deeper in, the mercenaries keep swinging their axes through the gloom. One mercenary notes the woods went weirdly dark and gripes they still haven't met a monster. Others laugh it off as a false rumor and joke about triple pay for such easy work. One ribs Gordon over his money and the big man just blinks back, lost. The bald mercenary cuts in and reminds them they chopped down countless trees getting here. Gordon, hauling a log, mumbles back that yeah, of course they did. The bald mercenary and two others stare, uneasy about what that truly means. Then he points at the path behind them and asks why it is solidly blocked again. Three shadowed men freeze, their eyes going white as the wrongness sinks in. A sharp shout cuts the air, calling every man to attention at once. Ghislain, Belinda, and his veterans rip out their weapons and drop into stances. Two mercenaries flinch, spooked by the sudden shift hanging in the air. Ghislain calls Gordon by name and warns he will die where he stands, then tells him to walk over slowly. His eyes stay locked on the big man, telling him to move one careful step at a time. Gordon hoists the log and inches forward, a faint ring flickering around his body. A white flash snaps against the tree trunk right beside him. An unseen blow slams Gordon and knocks him flailing while the crew tenses up. Two mercenaries curse the big idiot for drifting off on his own. Another one shrieks, his face twisting in raw panic. A colossal twisted tree now looms straight over the kneeling Gordon. The mercenaries gape at the tree, muttering that this is badly wrong. Ghislain says nothing, his jaw set, already sure of what waits here. The bald mercenary grins and mocks the boss for scaring so easily. He waves at the empty woods and calls the fearsome forest just a thick patch of trees. Ghislain fixes him with a hard stare and orders him over too, or he will die. The bald mercenary bristles, demanding why the boss keeps forcing this creepy mood on them. He jabs a finger and accuses him of only trying to scare the men into line. Mid-rant, his eye blows wide as he finally spots the shape looming behind him. A huge black hand erupts from the tree and clamps around him as he screams. The trunk splits into a ring of white fangs and drags him down its gullet. A single red slit eye yawns open in the bark, and Ghislain faces it with his sword drawn. He grits his teeth and names it, a direst ent, and the whole forest just bared its teeth. A giant twisted tree looms over the whole camp, its bark splitting into red eyes that glare down at Ghislain and his men. The mercenaries freeze under the huge pink eye, and one of them screams that these things are monsters. Raw panic rips through the crew, and a man howls that they will get eaten alive and to run. A red tendril whips out of the dark trunk and slashes across the clearing. The lash flings one mercenary into the air, while another gets ripped off his feet. The trunk splits into a ring of fangs and drags the falling men down its throat. More dark vines pound the tree with white bursts as two red eyes flare in the gloom. Gordon dangles high off the ground, kicking and screaming for someone to help him. A mercenary swings his axe at the thick vine and yells for Gordon to hold on tight. Another fighter braces between the coiling vines and grits his teeth. The axe bites the vine and stops dead, and he gasps that it will not break. The man stares in disbelief while Gordon hangs helpless behind him. The tree hauls Gordon even higher, and the crew screams his name up at the dark. Ghislain rises through the smoke with a glowing blue sword, Gordon still swinging above him. He drives the blade straight into the giant pink eye, and it bursts in a flash. Ghislain whips the sword back around, blue light trailing off the edge. The blade carves a bright streak through the black tangle of branches. He rams the sword down into the monster's red eye and splits it wide open. A freed mercenary shouts that the employer cut it down, so the eyes must be the weakness. Ghislain snaps around, blue eyes blazing, and orders his men to pull themselves together. He throws an arm out and tells them to raise shields and pack tight so nobody gets grabbed. Ghislain calls over the line to hold on defense until his next command, and they shout back, "Yes, sir." The mercenaries slam their shields into a wall as vines lash every side, one swearing he will not die here. Ghislain sprints to the cart and asks Kaor about the oil lamps, and Kaor says they are all here. He orders them to light the lamps and hurl them at the monsters, and a man finally gets why he packed so many. An eye-patched mercenary points and shouts that the monsters are looking their way. Ghislain bares his teeth and screams at the crew to throw the lamps now. They fling the burning lamps as Kaor roars at the monsters to get a taste of it. Dozens of lit lamps sail up through the air toward the towering trees. The vines swat the lamps aside before a single flame can catch. A sweating mercenary realizes the swing knocked them all away, so they cannot burn these things. The tree rears again over Kaor and the others, while Ghislain grunts and steadies himself. The blue blade sweeps upward in a tight, close arc. Ghislain cuts through a wall of vines as the mercenaries scramble around him. He wrenches his arm back, straining hard against the thrashing branches. Ghislain splits another eye and calls Gillian and Belinda to throw lamps while guarding the Cerberus men. Belinda and Gillian answer yes from behind him, their weapons ready. His glowing sword hangs straight up in the dark, waiting for the moment. The huge tree fills the sky as Ghislain plants himself below and says he will draw their attention. Belinda's face twists in fear, and she screams for the young master to watch out. Ghislain locks both hands on the hilt and meets the incoming blow head on. He spins through a full slash, blue light ringing around him as vines whip past. The monster's red eyes glare down at him through the smoke. Ghislain hacks through the mass of tendrils again as they twist and coil around him. The enormous red eye swells wide open right in front of him. Behind the shields, the men panic that these trees have legs now, and the employer is about to get stomped. Ghislain drops low and thrusts the blue sword straight up into the eye. The blade punches deep, and the whole mass shudders around him. The mercenaries gape as every monster turns and pours toward the employer. Belinda screams for the crew to throw all their lamps at once. Lit lamps rain down again as she yells that this time it will work. Kaor and the fighters huddle close while the fire finally takes hold. Flames climb the twisted trunk and its white eyes glow through the blaze. Kaor grins beside a wild-eyed fighter and shouts back, yes. Ghislain barks at his men to keep throwing and never stop. The fire spreads across the bark as he orders them to burn it all down. The whole monster stands wrapped in roaring flame. The mercenaries stare in awe, amazed they could actually fight back. One of them worries the entire forest is about to burn down with them. Gordon grins wide and jokes the things went down easy, since they are only trees. Ghislain turns his back on the fire and warns them not to drop their guard yet. He fixes the crew with a hard look and says the monsters will now show their true forms. Thick white steam boils off the burning trees and swallows the whole clearing. The mercenaries cough in the fog and wonder aloud if the fire went out. Belinda and Gillian rush to Ghislain, crying out for the young master. She asks what is happening, and Ghislain says the shells burn, but the insides do not. Ghislain explains the fire hits the wet flesh under the bark and blasts out the steam. A dark shape churns and shifts around inside the thick haze. A ring of fangs peels open at the center of the burning mass. The trees tear into flower-headed monsters with gaping maws as Kaor and Belinda watch beside Ghislain. The mercenaries recoil, shouting in shock that these things are still not dead. Ghislain lifts his massive blue sword above the shield line and tells everyone to pay attention. He raises the blade high overhead and orders his men to lift their weapons. Ghislain surges forward and warns them this is a close quarters fight from here on. He leaps into the flower-mouthed horde with a full swing and screams for the charge. Ghislain raises his glowing blue sword high and orders every man to lift his weapon. He faces the flower monsters, says the close fight starts now, and screams charge. Ghislain grits his teeth, blue eyes burning, and whips the blade around mid-swing. Far below, Ghislain looks tiny, charging alone at the wall of flower-mouthed monsters. His mercenaries freeze behind their shields, sure these giants will just stomp them flat. Kaor leaps out grinning, roars that he waited long enough, and calls the crew to charge. One mercenary hangs back, shield up, shouting for the young master to be careful. Old Ghislain glares at them and demands to know what they are all hesitating for. Ghislain drops through the smoke and splits a monster as Ghislain tells them to trust him. The mercenaries stall, faces tight, one of them staring back speechless. One man finally snaps, yells screw it, and says he trusts the employer to carry them through. The field erupts as Ghislain calls the burnt monsters mere dummies while Kaor roars them on. Ghislain's face goes cold and hard, because to him, hesitation out here means death. He charges a giant blue flower mouth alone, set on tearing every doubt out of his men. The huge maw yawns open, rows of teeth dripping as his blade tears in. Ghislain whips the sword straight up and splits the flower monster in one clean stroke. He plants himself in the smoke, sword high, monster corpses collapsing around him. The crew stares from the clearing as the last twisted monsters crash down dead. The mercenaries gasp for breath, barely believing they killed every one of them. They straighten up soaked and stunned as Ghislain calls for them to line up. Ghislain walks through the field of flower monster corpses, red cape dragging behind. He calls this the forest of beasts, already swarming with direst ents near the entrance. The veterans wipe their faces, rattled that the entrance alone is this brutal, but Ghislain tells them not to fret and walks out ahead of the whole group. He promises he will always stand at the very front, his cape turned to them. Ghislain looks back over his shoulder, blue eyes steady, telling them to trust and follow. The mercenaries line up in the rain and roar back a hard yes sir. The dark forest closes in around them, twisted branches shifting in the gloom. A jagged blue ice crystal bursts out of the ground as Ghislain and Ghislain brace against it. A red ogre beast roars in, while Belinda grabs Ghislain's face, fussing over him mid-fight. A red horned beast with a glowing eye lunges down, jaws wide, at the brace shield line. The mercenaries plant their shields, one man cursing that the monsters never end. Kaor and old Ghislain set their feet side by side and grip their weapons. Kaor ducks low under the lunging beast and reaches back to strike it. A fighter shouts to hit its legs, warning that the beast is toppling toward them. A mercenary braces his shield as the beast slams down in a burst of white. A blade streak splits the dark red and blue light trailing off it. Ghislain drives his sword deep into the beast's skull, blood spraying off its red eye. Over the corpse, Ghislain asks if anyone is hurt, and the crew shouts they are alive. The mercenaries lock shields and dare the monsters to come, staying tight at his side. Ghislain says the formation looks solid now, and Ghislain agrees real combat trains them best. Ghislain pushes them onward, telling the crew to keep clearing the path ahead. One mercenary trudges past, panting hard, and this is still the easy part of the forest. Back at camp, a jittery mercenary named Manus grumbles the whole crew has gone insane. Firelight flickers over the red rock walls of the pass they climb through. Night falls, and moonlight glints off a stream winding through the black trees. The mercenaries crowd a clear lake, gulping water, one crying how thirsty he is. Belinda warns it is dangerous, since nobody knows what might crawl out of that water. Ghislain studies the lake and marks it as the key milestone toward the runestone mine. He orders camp set by the water for a rest, and tents spread across the dark shore. Around a campfire, the men grumble about how far this forest still stretches ahead. One of them freezes at what Manus just floated and blurts out a stunned "what?" A mercenary asks if Manus really wants them all to sneak out of the forest. Manus leans in and argues there is no reason left to risk their lives out here. Another fighter shoots back that they came too far and the goal must be close now. Manus points up and brands the employer the scoundrel of Perdium, chasing a hidden goal. One fighter counters that they took the pay, so obeying the employer is simply the job. Manus admits the man can fight, but insists they got lucky and one slip kills them all. He grins wide and hisses that nobles always turn men like them into meat shields. One of the crew wavers, sweating, admitting Manus might actually have a point. In his head, Manus gloats the fear is spreading, then coldly plans to use them as bait. But another mercenary points out they would all be dead already without the employer. He points across the camp and tells them to look at what the employer is doing. Over there, careful hands pour a costly green potion straight onto a wounded man's arm. Ghislain dresses a mercenary's wound and warns him to keep water out before it infects. Belinda scolds him over the costly medicine, and Ghislain shrugs it is what it is for. He calls for the next patient while Manus glares at the whole scene from the shadows. Another mercenary says the employer spends potions on them worth more than their lives. The crew agrees he is nothing like other employers and would never abandon them. Manus grinds his teeth, cursing the old geezer for wrecking his plan to lure men out. Ghislain strolls up and tells them to cut the chatter and rest, and the crew snaps yes sir. He pulls Ghislain and Kaor aside, saying the three of them need to talk for a moment. Kaor mutters he would have cut the schemer's tongue out, but Ghislain says leave him be. Ghislain says there is a bigger matter he needs to confirm, lamps glowing behind them. Kaor asks why he had them count the lamps, reporting about 24 are left. Ghislain's face sharpens as he says a few lamps have gone missing, just as he expected. The nightly monster attacks flash back, beasts hurling at the camp again and again. Belinda and Kaor tense up as Ghislain notes the last two nights went dead silent. Old Gillian's eyes narrow as he realizes they walked into a nocturnal monster's territory. Ghislain confirms it, the four of them standing close in the lamplight. He stares out into the black forest, alone at the edge of the camp. Ghislain glances back with a sharp grin and says the real danger is only starting now. The camp sleeps under a black sky, tents and lanterns scattered across the dirt. A huge mercenary named Gordon lies flat on a wooden plank in the middle of it all. His face twitches under a white head wrap while the rest of the crew snores nearby. Gordon grits his teeth, scrunches up, and mumbles a groggy as he starts to stir. His eyes snap open at a lantern glowing right above his bare chest. The lantern drifts up on its own, and Gordon flinches back, asking why it is flying. A dark shape with glowing red spots looms over him, close enough to touch his face. The whole camp erupts. Mercenaries scream, and every head whips toward the noise. Gordon scrambles up, arms crossed over his face, and roars at the monster to back off. He swings a wild arm through empty air and screams at the thing to get lost. Other mercenaries sprint over and shout, asking Gordon what is going on with him. Gordon points and swears a monster was standing right beside him a second ago. Three of the crew just stare, then flatly ask him what he is even talking about. They tell Gordon nothing is around him and he looks himself over, completely lost. Gordon breaks into a sweat and mutters a baffled nothing back at them. A bearded merc figures he had a nightmare, since his sleep talking was so loud. Another voice cuts in and insists this is not just noisy sleep talking. An eye-patched merc admits he felt a strange presence and watched a lantern vanish. More men chime in about a creepy laugh, and the fear spreads fast through the camp. The scarred, long-haired merc says one thing is certain to him now. Something real is prowling the camp, out past the reach of the lantern light. A steady voice tells the men they saw right through the whole trick. Ghislain strides in between old Gillian and Kaor as the crew calls him employer. His blue eyes fix straight ahead, and Ghislain orders everyone to gather up close. The whole company packs in around the leaders, murmuring in the dark. Gordon gasps that the monsters have surrounded them where no eye can catch them. Ghislain says that is only natural, since staying unseen is their whole nature. He narrows one glowing eye and says they picked up the trail back at the lake. Ghislain names them as Feloras, hunters that rule the dark heart of this forest. They melt into the black, so eyes slide past and steel passes clean through them. Hundreds hunt as one and steal the light, and Gordon chokes on that count. The missing lanterns finally make sense, and Kaor spits that they want to toy with prey. Kaor pushes to strike first, but Ghislain says they wait and punish the charge. Belinda's pink eyes narrow, and she argues they cannot just sit here waiting. Ghislain warns that a reckless charge only makes them crueler and scatters them. The plan lands, and a stunned voice repeats, wiping the whole herd out at once. A merc asks how that works against hundreds of unseen monsters, and Ghislain says yes. He asks Belinda for the magic scrolls, and every mercenary already holds one. With the scrolls ready, Ghislain tells the circle he will explain the fight now. He draws his sword and drives the long blade down into the dirt beside him. Ghislain scratches a map and shows the Falors closing in from 3 separate sides. Badly outnumbered, the crew cannot cover every gap against something this inhuman. The lake at their backs blocks a full encirclement, and old Ghislain agrees flatly. Ghislain grins that the fight is far from lost because they hold the initiative. He lays out a plan to split the whole company into 3 working groups. The defenders lock their shields up front to soak every attack that lands. The crossbow line loads behind them to break the monster's charge cold. Then the elite assault unit, Ghislain included, gathers for the finishing blow. The shields and crossbows bunch in the center and shove the enemy backward. Meanwhile, the assault group hammers the left flank with every bit of firepower. If the middle wraps around the herd, Ghislain says the whole fight is theirs. Gillian nods along, and when Gordon doubts it, Ghislain says the center only has to endure. Belinda throws up a gloved hand and tells the whole circle to wait a moment. She reminds him the Falores shrug off physical hits by melting into the dark. The circle falls quiet as her sharp question hangs over Ghislain and Kaor. Ghislain smiles that they just use mana and tells Belinda not to worry about it. His blue eyes gleam as he reminds them all they are holding the magic scrolls. Night drops hard, and the screams of the herd roll across the Black Hills. The shields pack tight while a merc yells at everyone to hold the formation. They lose the last lamp, and a shaking voice warns that something is coming. The Pioneer Journal of the Delphine gets quoted as the mercs plant their feet. A man lifts a rune-covered scroll that the Falores are said to dread deeply. Bright light drags their real bodies into view, the journal says, and Ghislain shouts now. Belinda and old Gillian crack their first circle scrolls, and blue light floods out. Kaor and a helmeted merc tear theirs open, and the glow spills across the camp. The light bursts upward in a blue column that rips the darkness wide open. A Falores gets caught mid-strike, red spots flaring as it shrieks a wet keek. The glow pours over the field and drags every hidden monster into plain sight. The eel-shaped things writhe and recoil, blinded by a brightness they cannot take. The shield line gawks that the dark broke, and these eels were the hunters all along. The exposed herd surges forward, and a defender screams for everyone to brace. The crossbow line looses a heavy volley to stall the charge in its tracks. The shields dig in and hold as the first monsters crash bloody into the wall. Behind them, Ghislain lifts his blade high, while Kaor and Belinda fall in beside him. He scans the field and says their true shape has finally been dragged out. Ghislain levels the glowing sword at the herd and orders the assault unit to charge. He tears in first, with Kaor grinning and Belinda close on his heels. Ghislain stands in the black rain, sword glowing, the Falores coiling in the dark around him. He calls the assault units to charge, and his fighters break forward right at his back. They crash into the swarm, blades flashing as a huge black maw snaps open above them. Ghislain drops in low and rips his sword up through the first Falores in his way. These things blend into the dark, but under the light, their bodies are soft and easy to cut. He orders the party to thin the herd fast, and they answer him as one. Gillian plants himself up front as the tank, dragging every monster onto his shield. Kaor tears through the middle to wreck their formation and split the pack apart. The Falores twist and screech as their neat wall of bodies gets ripped wide open. Then Belinda slides in to carve a clean gap, working her support through the swarm. She spreads her arms wide, and thin wires fan out across the whole battlefield. Belinda locks a target and screams for her young master to take the opening now. Ghislain reads her call and blasts through the gap, his squad slicing in around him. His sword comes down and splits a Falores in half, blood flying off the edge. This is the elite muscle of House Perdium, and each of them fights on another level. A pulse of blue light erupts off the strike and floods the whole dark field. Behind them, the hired shield line holds firm, spearing every monster that hits the wall. Blades and bolts punch into the Falores as they pile against the front. But the defenders are cracking, out of arrows and yelling for the assault units to hurry. A wolf-headed Falores lunges at the line, and the front row screams as its jaws drop. Then a blue blade falls out of nowhere and cleaves that beast right off them. Ghislain and his squad crash down into the middle of the shaken line. He tells the exhausted men they did well to hold out this long. The mercs light up, yelling that their employer showed, so now they're saved. The order goes out to spread the formation and box the Falores in from every side. A big horned Falores rears back and lets out a shriek across the herd. Just like that, the monsters break and flee, the mercs blinking as the swarm pulls back. Ghislain narrows his eyes. They pulled out before the net closed, so these things think. He turns to Belinda and asks her to find the leader, the one with the horn. The team asks about chasing, but these Falors fixate on prey and would harass the camp for days. He wants no war of attrition, so he'll kill the horned leader and drop the whole pack here. Belinda goes quiet for a second, just watching him give the call. She grips her wires and thinks to herself that he has changed a lot. Then she pulls a needle taut and takes the order without another word. Belinda opens her thread wings and casts a web out over the fleeing swarm. The wires whip out and comb through the retreating monsters for one shape. She dives after them with her cape flaring, hunting straight into the pack. Below her, the Falors clump into a dark mass as she drops right into it. A huge fanged head snaps up at her, but this beast is only a straggler. She hauls her wire back and finally spots it, the leader wearing the single horn. Her wires stab down and pin the horned one so it cannot slip away. Belinda calls out that she found it, and Ghislain is already dropping through the corridor she cut. He rushes the trapped leader with his sword held low, closing in fast. His blade lights up and carves a long line straight down at it. The strike lands hard, blood bursting as the horned beast folds under the hit. Ghislain rips clean through its body, tearing the leader open in one pass. He lands under its dropping head and says it plainly, it's over. The horned leader roars once and comes apart in a spray of blood and shadow. Ghislain plants his feet in the middle of the pack, sword up and dripping. The word rips across the field that their leader is finally dead. The mercs pour forward and taunt the things for hunting them in the dark. Kaor fires up his Cerberus crew and tells them not to lose to the old man. A blue slash punches through the final one in a burst of light. The whole party circles the last body, and Ghislain tells them the fight is won. He rests the big sword point down and lets a small grin slip out. A defender throws his weapon up as the good news rolls down the shield line. The whole line erupts, grown men howling that they survived and they won. Belinda checks if her young master is hurt, and he thanks the crew for the hard work. Then Ghislain sends Belinda to count heads and has Kaor gather his Cerberus men. Kaor asks what spreading corpses even does, and Ghislain says the reek keeps monsters away. Gillian tells the kid it just means the camp gets safer, and Kaor's face snaps into a scowl. Kaor squares up and dares the old man to settle it right here, while Ghislain just goes silent. Ghislain stands alone in the wreck, thinking back on 10 days inside the Forest of Beasts. With the Falors wiped out, his route is clear and only the runestones are left to mine. He looks out at the pale dawn breaking over the far ridgeline. For a second, he lets himself wonder if the worst is really behind them. Belinda brings the head count, 41 Cerberus men and 126 hired mercs, 3 short. Kaor puffs up that not one of his own fighters fell, since he leads them, but the missing 3 came from the contract mercs, and nobody can even find their bodies. 2 mercs argue over a guy named Manus, one guessing he died in the fight. Another figures the coward simply bolted, and honestly that red is too obvious. Sure enough, 3 deserters are sprinting through the trees far from the camp. They pant that they would have died back there, thanking Manus for dragging them out. Manus snaps at them to move while everyone is busy, telling them to keep running to live. Then he notices the other 2 have stopped dead in their tracks. Manus turns around and asks why they froze all of a sudden. One of them points a shaking knife past him, choking out that a shape is looming behind him. All 3 go stiff as 2 red eyes flare open in the black behind them. Manus stares up at it, every drop of color gone from his face. What the hell is that? A massive coiled body uncoils in the dark red and purple scales, catching the blue crystal light. The huge body drops straight down onto a heap of bones and half-rotted corpses below. 2 red eyes flare open in the murk, the slit pupils locking onto fresh prey. Elsewhere in the forest, a felled tree crashes down and shakes the whole ground. Ghislain's mercs are hauling logs and loading wagons, one of them yelling that his cart is already full. Kaor watches the work and mutters that the crew is finally moving without anyone barking orders. He admits he has never once seen these lazy hires break a sweat like this before. Gillian grins that they toil hard, unlike a certain someone, and Kaor waves the old man off with a flat whatever. Kaor asks if the plan is to release them all once the job wraps, since that would be a waste. Ghislain thinks to himself that mercenaries are a mess at teamwork and crumble against real armies. But these men already outgrew that limit through the brutal fighting here, and he plans to build his power on them. A soldier called Gazelle reports the Falor corpses are scattered along the trail, and Kaor gives a nod. Kaor tells Ghislain the trick worked, since not a single monster showed up the entire way in. The path behind them sits dead empty, without even one lost beast drifting through the trees. Ghislain goes quiet and hopes the uneasy knot in his gut is nothing but paranoia. Belinda comes diving down out of the branches, shouting for her young master. She lands hard, says she is back, and Ghislain asks what she spotted further ahead. Belinda's eyes blow wide and she blurts out that she absolutely found the place. Ghislain's head snaps around, and his whole expression sharpens at her news. He orders the column to push forward with everything they have, and the mercs roar back a yes sir. They round the bend and freeze because a wall of glowing blue crystal fills the cavern ahead. The hired men gape and stammer that this whole thing cannot possibly be real. Ghislain tells them plainly that this exact site is the reason he launched the expedition. It is a runestone mine, and the grade of the crystal here is the highest quality there is. Kaor sweats and gawks that the forest really was hiding a fortune, and Ghislain smirks that his young master always acts on reason. Belinda throws her arms around him from behind, laughing and asking how he even knew about this. The mercs stare at the ocean of runestones and start dreaming out loud about going home rich. Then Ghislain cuts them off with a flat no, his eyes climbing to the black peak above the crystals. A lone shape lies crumpled in the drifting fog. Gone completely still, Ghislain narrows his eyes to slits as the dread finally clicks into place. Up close, the shape is a corpse, its face frozen in a grin with a hole punched through the skull. From above, the group rings the body, and one merc chokes out the name Manus in shock. A huge bald fighter tenses up and growls that the deserter was a complete fool. The bald man and a one-eyed merc lean over the corpse, baffled how Manus even reached this spot. Ghislain draws his blade and orders every one of them to step back right now. He swings the steel hard through the thick hanging fog. The slash tears the mist wide open in front of the whole group. The fog peels back to reveal a mountain of bones and bodies towering over them. The mercs recoil, screaming that corpses cover everything, and some of them look human, not monster. Belinda and Ghislain close ranks around him, and Ghislain says the runestones will not come for free. He reads it as a living nest, the fresher corpses barely rotted, all of it masked until now by the reeking fog. Ghislain grinds his teeth because none of his records ever flagged this mine as any danger. He spins and starts yelling for everyone to snap to attention and brace for a fight. Right then, a massive reptilian head shoves out of the crystals, red eyes burning bright. The blood python cranks its jaws open, its mouth crammed with long curved fangs. Ghislain throws his arm up and screams at the whole crew to scatter this instant. The head rockets straight down at him, and he launches his body up to meet it. He brings his mana-lit blade down hard across the top of the skull. The edge bites into the head, yet it leaves nothing more than a shallow scratch. He rams the point into the snout, and even that barely digs past the scales. Kaor and Ghislain gape that charged steel only grazed it, wondering what these scales are made of. The python whips its head sideways with Ghislain still clinging on above. His next cut finally opens a wound, and a jet of bright green fluid sprays out. Ghislain reads it in a heartbeat and barks the single word poison. The green burst erupts everywhere as he twists his body clear of the splash. The tail swings around and he kicks off it while the poison steams off his edge. He grimaces hard and yanks his face back from the burning green mist. One more red line opens up as the blade carves down through the dark. The giant body slams past, and a nearby merc howls as the raw wind flings him off his feet. The python rears back again, jaws split wide, that red eye glaring straight down. Belinda screams for her young master, pure terror written across her face. The massive coils come crashing down into the very middle of the mercenaries. The men scatter shrieking, warning each other off, cursing how monstrously huge the snake is. The coils flatten the ground while Ghislain hauls fighters clear and Belinda's wires snap taut. The whole camp dissolves into screaming, some begging to dodge, some calling for the young lord. Ghislain crouches low in the bones, his dread finally gone, certain now that this beast rules the entire mine. The full-blood python looms over him, one of the monsters he had written off as unkillable this trip. It nested in the deepest woods, the exact fight he swore he would never have to take. His odds here are ugly, and every instinct screams retreat, yet he stares at the blue runestone in his palm. His gauntlet clenches into a hard, shaking fist over the stone. Backing off now would turn his whole revenge into wasted effort, so he growls at the beast to stay out of his way. Ghislain rises with a mana core blazing in his chest and warns it that he simply carries far too much to lose. Ghislain drops low with his blade drawn, a third mana core blazing in his chest, and warns the snake not to get in his way. His hair whips up as that third core fully unleashes and floods his whole body with fresh mana. The blood python's massive head lunges down, jaws split wide and fangs bared, while he holds his ground below. Ghislain meets it head on and swings his glowing blade up at the diving skull. The edge rakes clean across the beast's thick red neck. He spins through the full swing, a bright mana arc trailing behind the steel. A second long gash opens down the scaled hide. The python's huge tail whips back around, and he throws an arm up to guard. The blow blasts past him in a burst of white and nearly tears him off his feet. Ghislain grits his teeth and braces behind his gauntlet, barely holding against the raw force. The red head snaps at him again, jaws gaping, that ruined eye still glaring down. He dashes low across the ground, blade dragging a red streak even with the odds stacked against him. His face twists into a snarl, because this is one fight he refuses to walk away from. He steadies himself, picturing a dark throne with shadow hands reaching in, this duty resting on him alone. Belinda and old Gillian flash by among his crew, every face worried for him. Now he throws himself at the beast, blade high, set on finishing what his duty demands. Ghislain locks his eyes on the blood python, jaw tight, sizing up the monster in front of him. His purple eye narrows to a thin line, reading every twitch of the giant snake. The python looms over him, tongue flicking, showing no sign of slowing down at all. He knows the hard truth that holding the third core this long will drain his mana before he can land a kill. His mercenaries come charging up behind him, shouting for their young lord. Gillian and another fighter push in close, checking whether he took a wound. Belinda begs him to run for safety, promising the crew will pin the monster down. Ghislain cuts her off and orders every last one of them to leave this place instead. The whole group freezes, stunned, one merc stammering back, "What did you just say?" Gillian stares at him, baffled, and asks what their young lord could possibly mean. Ghislain looks up at the coiled snake and admits even he can't keep them safe against something this huge. His eyes harden as he names the real reason, that he can't afford to lose any of them here. Belinda asks what happens to him and he answers flat that he will kill the monster himself. She still can't grasp why he would push this far, not after all the near miracles she has watched him pull. Ghislain grips the blade tighter, the mana core still roaring inside his chest. The python sprays a flood of green poison straight down, and he screams at them to leave quickly. He roars the order a second time, veins standing out, desperate to get them clear. The mercs scramble and swing anyway, blades flashing as the venom rains around them. The green torrent hammers their raised shields, and the men huddle under the splash. Ghislain's eyes go wide, caught off guard that his men still won't back down. A shield wall snaps into place in front of him as they beg to fight at his side. Two grinning fighters tell him they've never had an employer like him, one who saved their lives again and again. A fighter smirks that once the snake is dead, the treasure is theirs, while Belinda swears she won't leave her young master behind. Gillian braces his shield and promises to draw the beast's attention and open a gap, and Ghislain says his name. The old retainer tells him that since the crew has trusted him this whole time, he should trust them right back. Ghislain goes quiet, running the numbers on the beast's sheer size. He weighs its lethal poison too, while his fighters wait on his call. Those crimson scales shrug off even mana blades, and a single clean hit from it would kill any of them. Belinda calls out to him one more time, fear plain across her face. Then Ghislain spots the opening, that smashed right eye and the raw wound already torn into its head. His mana pours into the blade until it glows huge and bright above the crowd. He lifts the sword high and calls out to the whole Forest of Beasts expedition team. He tells them all to make it home alive, and the fighters roar back a solid yes sir. The blood python rears up with a roar, fangs wide, ready to meet the charge. The crew crashes in at once, Belinda leaping while blades and shields swarm the giant snake. One of his men drops in with a mana-charged axe and hammers the beast in a burst of light. Another fighter springs off its coils and cracks a blow into its red hide. A strike lands square near its ruined eye and splits the scales with a flash. Ghislain moves through the chaos, knowing even his memory of the future won't hand him this win. The venom bursts out once more and scatters the shielded men across the bones. The snake roars over the formation, and he knows that if he stalls now, many of them die. He drops low, wins the glowing blade back over his head, and refuses to let that happen. Ghislain launches straight into its open jaws and drives the point down, the one man who knows this land's future. The blade punches deep and the whole lower jaw erupts in a white shock. Belinda and Ghislain freeze mid-swing with the rest, screaming for their young lord. His red edge tears through the meat and a gout of dark blood sprays loose. He rips the blade along in one long arc that peels the hide wide open. He kicks off in a swirl of mana fire as the beast's skull snaps back from the cut. His fighters watch frozen, Belinda's eyes blown wide at what he is pulling off. Ghislain bares his teeth in a grin and declares that he is the future of Perdium. Then his blade comes down in one final flash that tears clean through the monster. Far from the forest, the tall white towers of Castle Perdium rise over the land. Inside, a knight slams his fist on the table and calls the whole thing a serious crime. Albert rages that the young lord ignored a direct order and marched into the forest anyway. Another retainer says the boy has grown unruly, acting like he rules the land while the true lord stayed away. An older advisor waves it all off, noting it has already been 2 weeks since the boy went in. Down in a cell sit 2 prisoners, and they mention a knight named Scoven who faked a report to help him slip out. Hands jab toward the lord, demanding he jail the young lord the second he returns and punish him. The lord just stares ahead in silence, one name sitting heavy on his mind, Ghislain. Then a door bangs open and a knight rushes in, shouting for his lord. Randolph says they all need to come down and see this, and the lord asks what is wrong. The answer stuns the whole room that young Lord Ghislain has finally come back. Above the misty grounds, the castle's blue spires stand waiting for him. And here he comes, sword in hand, walking straight up to a court that already wants him thrown in chains. Ghislain walks into his father's great hall, where the lord and his retainers already sit waiting. One retainer's eyes snap wide the second the young heir shows his face. Another glares hard, jaw tight, clearly ready to tear into him. The oldest advisor narrows his tired eyes at the boy in the doorway. His father just watches in dead silence, giving away nothing at all. Ghislain meets that stare head on and simply tells him he's home, father. His father cuts straight to it, reminding him the Forest of Beasts was off limits. Ghislain lowers his eyes and admits he's sorry, but it had to be done. A retainer scoffs that had to be done still means he flat out ignored his father's order. Another jabs a metal hand up, snapping that entering the forest is a crime, and the monsters could have poured into their land. Ghislain stays cool and points out he came back alive, and no monsters touched their territory. The old advisor sputters, stunned, while a retainer behind him fumes that the boy dares to talk back. His father leans in over the tea table and asks the young lord if he finds this funny. The lord waves it off, saying the forest trip can slide since nothing bad came of it. Then he tosses a letter at Ghislain's feet and asks if he has any excuse for that. Ghislain lifts the page and reads the name off it out loud, Count Rayfold. His father lays it bare that Ghislain strong-armed Lady Amelia for 20,000 gold from Rayfold's fund, so the furious count cut them off and killed the engagement. Ghislain studies the letter, clocking that it's real, from a count who hates Amelia and bends easily to greed. His mind flashes to Amelia, and he knows she'll join hands with her own enemy just to bury him. Her old blackmail is dead weight now, since the secret deal will read like noise made to hide this scandal. His eyes harden because one thing is clear to him, time is not on his side. A bearded retainer presses him, begging the young lord to give them an answer already. 2 others panic, demanding back the 20,000 gold that could fund the night order for months. Ghislain turns his back to them and tells the room flat that he used all of it. He says every coin went into developing the Forest of Beasts. The whole council goes quiet, jaws hanging at the answer. Albert grips his teacup and asks if the boy really burned that fortune on a useless forest. Ghislain dips his head and offers a quiet sorry. A retainer grabs him by the collar, yet he stays calm and says he has nothing to add about the Rayfold mess. The retainer hauls him closer, roaring that the heir sold off the future of his own land with his bare hands. The old advisor brands him a criminal and screams to drag him to a cell, right as Ghislain offers to cover the support money himself. He grips his own collar, smirks, and promises the whole fund back, the 20,000 gold included. A retainer freezes and asks him what on earth he means by that. Grinning, Ghislain calls out for Belinda, who steps up with a chest in her arms. She sets it on the table as he says he'd never have started the dig without a real haul to bring home. The retainers crane in as a cold blue light spills up out of the box. Ghislain opens his hand over it and names it top grade runestone, Belinda steady at his side. One retainer nearly falls into the table, choking out the word runestone. With the castle behind him, Ghislain says the trip was meant to help the land, so the reward belongs to it. A retainer stammers to the lord that this haul means no more starving for support money. Two more just stare, faces frozen at the sight. A heavy gauntlet claps onto Ghislain's shoulder from behind. Retainers crowd around with warm words about his trip, then add that the fund comes with a few conditions. One of them balks, sweating, and repeats the word conditions back at him. Ghislain throws up two fingers and says first, free Scoven and Ricardo, since they only followed his orders. Second, he wants civilian access to the Forest of Beasts kept banned, exactly as before. He warns that loose rumors would only breed trouble, and an old retainer mutters that this sounds fair enough. Ghislain smirks and drops the last one, that he'll recruit and run the mercenaries and security himself. The room erupts, asking if he means to keep a private army, since they don't trust his scheming. Albert strokes his chin and says a man begging forgiveness shouldn't be talking like he owns the place. Ghislain calls that a misread, Treasurer Albert, and says he's only setting terms to bankroll Perdium in Rayfold's place. He adds that letting this petty spat stall them would hurt Perdium too, then asks if Albert is fine with that. One old retainer begs his brother to speak up since they're bargaining with the future of the land, but the man stays silent. Someone calls out for the young lord, and Ghislain turns toward the voice. Outside, his mercenaries greet him and thank him for the work, and he answers with a simple yes. A white-bearded giant reports the runestone is nearly loaded and they can move on his word. A red-haired fighter adds that the direst ent hides are stored raw, no preservatives, just as ordered. They ask about the blood python, and Ghislain says the corpse gets carved up and every part of it preserved before it rots. Off to the side, his father says Randolph, and Randolph answers that these mercenaries are each terrifying on their own. Ghislain strolls off, flanked by two of them, and Randolph admits he can't grasp how the boy gathered such men. His father watches him go and says they move like a real elite force. Ghislain glances back, one blue eye catching the light. His father says bending mercenaries this rough took real effort, and Ghislain says the expedition would have failed without them. The Lord shuts his eyes, says alright, and calls for everyone to head back, leaving a retainer stunned. He walks off in his fur cloak and tells Ghislain he'll let this one slide. Then his father warns, face like stone, that defying his orders again will carry real consequences. Ghislain lets a small smile through and thanks his father, the man who names him the heir to this whole land. He watches them climb toward the castle as his father says he carries the Northern Wolf's spirit after all. The name lands heavy since it belongs to Count Perdium, guardian of Luthania's frontier, a truly lonely man. Weak troops, an empty treasury, yet up in the north where war never stops, a lone wolf still held the line. He poured his whole life into this land without his wife Elena or his son, and died a miserable death that everyone forgot. Back with the crew, a fighter cheers that one job is finally done and asks if they head straight to the castle. Ghislain says not yet, to keep everything ready to move, and Belinda gawks that he won't even rest. She and the giant press him, saying he pushed too hard, a miracle he made it out of the python alive. Belinda's voice cracks as she starts listing how hard she fought to flush the venom out of him. Ghislain reaches out and says her name, quiet, Belinda. He holds her gaze and just asks her, please. Around them, the crew waits, and he knows word of the runestone will travel fast. It will reach the ears hungry to invade their land just as quickly as anyone else's. A bead of sweat runs down as he tells himself he has to grow his power fast. He spreads his arms toward the open sky, set on climbing until no one dares challenge him. Then Ghislain kicks off the ground and launches skyward as his crew shouts after their young lord. A white dove sweeps up through a dark hall toward a glowing round window. It glides onto an open hand, a small message tube strapped to its leg. A shadowed figure on the throne grips the note, one gold eye lit. The order, crush the Degard family and erase Perdium. A lone flame glows in the dark as a voice repeats it, the annihilation of Perdium, so the ducal house can seize the land. Overhead, cloaked figures ring a round table, and their house means to hand Perdium a new lord. A sharp profile with a burning gold eye leans from the shadow. He asks how many of their own are still planted inside Perdium. A man lowers a cup at the table and answers. 2 retainers and 1 knight remain on the inside. A bandaged corpse slumps in the gloom, the lost young lord of Degard, whose death in Perdium is excuse enough for war. A slitted gold eye flares with the letter V burning inside. The supreme commander of the whole operation will be Victor. The table erupts, one man choking that their strongest card is out too early when Frank should have sunk Perdium alone. A calmer member warns the hidden card feels rash, asking why a House of Secrets would move on Perdium so openly. A man flinches as the answer lands: the Forest of Beasts. That cursed forest is why the house will not wait. A pale hand lays down the law. Every decision came from Duke Delphine, and no order gets questioned. A hard-faced man with swept-back hair and gold eyes gives the word: prepare for war. His scarred face leans closer, gold eye glowing, and he asks if anyone else knows what is coming. A raw scream splits the air over a shadowed balcony far away. In a grand hall, Lady Amelia screams one name, Ghislain Perdium, as her knight catches her. The knight steadies her with a quiet "my lady" while she shakes and tears run down. Amelia chokes out that Ghislain seized a whole runestone mine with her own 20,000 gold. Her red eyes brim as she snarls her hired wildcats failed to kill him, even after she bowed to her father to cut Perdium's funds. The knight keeps his voice flat and cold and tells her this is not like you. Her hair falls over her eyes as a small sob shakes loose in the dark. The two stand in a lavish room, and Amelia admits he is right. She got too emotional. Her head snaps up, red eyes sharp and one fist tight, and she says, "What is done cannot be undone." The knight holds his hard gaze on her and says he is waiting for her order. The pair stand over a war table, and she notes that mine will soon end Perdium's money troubles. Amelia names the catch: they have not sold the runestone yet, and 2 days is too little time to build a selling network. A single red eye burns as she vows to pry that weakness wide open. Face to face, she tells the knight it is obvious who Ghislain would sell to, and only one buyer in the north fits. A tall crimson spire stabs a violet sky, ruled by a 7th circle archmage, the Crimson Magic Tower. A hand plants a blue flag on the map, and she sends the wildcats to ambush the roads to that tower. Masked wildcats swarm a runestone wagon, aiming for the porters hauling it so they can seize the stone. The knight warns the Flame Magic Tower also sits north in Brabant's land, asking if betting all on Crimson is wise. Amelia's eye burns red as a younger man's face looms beside her, and she says the Flame Tower has slid for years on faded glory. She glares ahead, teeth bared, certain a man that greedy picks the richer Crimson deal and vows to take all he has. A proud stone castle rises under a calm, bright sky far up in the north. A bloody memory returns, Galen sprawled and wounded, his pale hair matted red. Sword drawn, a purple-cloaked Ghislain drops straight into a giant red maw. The blood python rears up massive, its cracked hide steaming with red energy. Ghislain tumbles through green venom as the beast digests him, its stomach melting prey in acid to feed easier. Trapped in the gut, he grits his teeth as fumes crowd in, his third core burning the acid while the smoke chokes him. His eyes go pale and strained under the pressure. Most prey blacks out or dies right about here. Ghislain's face twists in a snarl, one white eye blown wide. He tells himself he must hold on, or all of it ends. A blood-flecked castle flares behind him, his whole future at stake, so he chooses to make the poison his own. Ghislain hangs in the churning venom and drives his will inward. Red marks blaze on his face as pink mana lines carve his chest, and his core grinds the venom apart. His eyes clamp shut in fierce focus. Only a true superhuman can steer mana this finely. One violet eye snaps wide, its center swirling with raw new power. Ghislain erupts upward in a red surge, the tamed venom now his backup fuel against a mana blast. Ghislain jolts awake flat on his back, his chest wrapped tight in bandages. He pushes upright on the pillow and mutters that he feels oddly refreshed. Ghislain clutches his head, recalling only his father's pardon, and asks whose room this is. He turns and freezes at a small blonde girl in a red shirt beside the bed. The girl leans in close, braids swinging, watching him with wide blue eyes. She says he was out cold 2 full days, dropping the second he got home. Then she softens and greets him, "Hi, brother." Ghislain stares back, shaken, and quietly breathes her name. Elena. Elena shoves him flat again with a huff, and he grunts as he hits the sheets. She whirls to the door and yells for Belinda that he is finally awake. Ghislain sits up, bandages tight over his ribs, and it lands. 2 days gone. On the bed's edge, he thinks back. He took only quick aid from Belinda after the python, and his young body gave out. Ghislain flexes a fist and checks his arms. Stunned, he feels this strong when 2 days should never heal that damage. Bandages slip off his legs and pool on the floor as he mutters that this is strange. He eyes his bare chest and a fist wrapped in blue flame. His toughness and total mana both climbed. Ghislain stands shirtless in a blue glow, green light pulsing under his palm, his mana itself now different. His face splits between a calm blue half and a charged dark one, and he wonders if the python's power seeped into his core. Green and blue light ripple over his chest as he realizes this trick never existed in his past life. He stands with fists tight and bandages at his feet, the gamble unplanned but able to grow him dozens of times faster. Ghislain lifts a fist, his eyes hardening with a hungry little grin. He steps to a mirror and files it away, since selling the runestone comes first after 2 days of rumors. He tugs a white shirt down over his bandaged stomach, hair hiding his eyes. Ghislain's blue eyes settle as he dresses and decides to call his mercenaries first. A sound at the door turns his head, and he says Belinda has no reason to knock. A blue boot steps through the doorway instead, not the crew he expected. A tall man with long silver hair and a blue fur cloak fills the doorway. The weathered face and calm blue eyes settle on him as the man says, "You're awake." Ghislain's eyes fly wide and he stammers out, "Father." The room widens to his father, Elena, and Belinda close by, and he asks if the son poisoned by the python is all right. His father shuts his eyes with a faint smile and says that is a relief. Belinda grabs his face in both hands, panicked that he collapsed, and he tells her he is fine. She cradles his cheeks and softly says Ghislain, a jolt of surprise popping over him. His father cuts in, asking if Ghislain has a moment to talk, Belinda and Elena watching. His father's grim face hardens as he says he has a request. Ghislain's puzzled eyes lock forward as he echoes it, a request from the father who just pardoned him. Ghislain walks into the training hall as his father leads the way with a sword in hand. It hits him that this is the first time he has ever been alone with the man. In his past life, he dodged his father, too scared the man would only ever yell at him. His father apologizes for calling him out right after he woke, and Ghislain says the rest did him good. Ghislain asks straight out what that request is, the one his father came all this way to make. His father just studies him and says nothing for a long, heavy beat. The two stand across the empty circle while the quiet keeps stretching out. A memory surfaces for Ghislain, a line his mother told him as a boy, and he wonders if this is what she meant. In it, his mother sits with him in a sunset field and says his father cannot show his honest self to anyone. The child looks up surprised and asks whether that could really be true. His mother explains the man believes he must stay an unshakable pillar for the people of the land. She says he puts others first and never drops the act except the one time he confessed his love to her. She tells the boy to understand that side of a father who is just bad at showing his feelings. Back in the present, his father lifts his blade and tells him to raise his weapon. Ghislain grips his own sword, answers yes, father, and settles into a low stance. The two square off in the courtyard, blades up, ready to spar. They launch at each other and the swords crash together in a shower of sparks. His father drives a strike down, and Ghislain drops to one knee to catch it on his guard. Steel flashes back and forth as the pair trade quick blows across the stone floor. His father sweeps the blade in a wide arc while Ghislain twists clear of the edge. Both fighters land and reset their stances as dust drifts over the training ground. Ghislain feels the blade's weight, and it lands what his father's real swordsmanship is like. His father takes a tall stance, his strikes built to put down the savage barbarians of the north. Yet every swing carries an odd gentleness, the kind meant to shield people, not crush them. His father cuts in again and the blade throws sparks right beside Ghislain's head. They lock swords face to face and his father's eyes narrow with focus. Ghislain pushes off and drives his point in, sparks bursting against his father's guard. Ghislain blocks an overhead swing, then his father wheels the blade back down at him. The two press edge against edge in the middle of the wide hall. Ghislain lifts his sword high to catch the next cut coming straight down at him. His father freezes as Ghislain's point stops at his throat, sweat beading on his brow. His father lowers his own blade and admits that Ghislain has improved a whole lot. Ghislain catches his breath, grins a little, and thanks him for the match. Then his father adds a however, and Ghislain's eyes sharpen at once. His father says to ease the pressure in a blade lock, since raw strength makes his intent too easy to read. Ghislain rubs his chin, mulling it over, since he usually reads a foe only as the fight drags on. It dawns on him that this is the first time anyone has ever handed him real guidance. His fighting was raw instinct from combat, so basics slipped past a man who never trained formally. His father caught those exact gaps mid-spar and pointed every one of them out. Ghislain always figured he had only himself to lean on, but pointers are not so bad after all. He opens his eyes with a small smile and thanks his father for the lesson. His father looks away a moment, weighing his words before he speaks. His father admits he came here planning to scold him today, and Ghislain blinks out a confused pardon. His father says results do not erase broken rules, and if everyone breaks them for glory, chaos follows. Ghislain takes that in without a word, his face gone still. Then his father softens and says he has changed from the reckless boy who chased merit at any cost. Over a wide view of the castle, his father says the boy now aims toward a far bigger purpose. His father tells him to keep going, to think of Perdium and carry his duties as successor. Ghislain turns the word responsibilities over in his head, quiet for a second. Then he remembers and calls out, asking about the request his father never explained. His father stops halfway across the smoky courtyard and glances back at him. His father hesitates, mutters a huh and a well, clearly a little awkward now. Then the great swordmaster sheepishly asks his son if he has any spare cash lying around. Out at the Forest of Beasts outpost, Ghislain walks back into his mercenary camp past spikes of ice. His mercenaries turn as he arrives, a huge bald fighter and a row of hooded men muttering. A small grin spreads across Ghislain's face as he takes in the whole crew. He lifts his head and asks the entire company if they have all been keeping well. The mercenaries roar back, "Yes, employer," crowding around Ghislain and Belinda at the center. Kaor says he looks healthier now, and the old knight Ghislain asks if the young lord has recovered. Ghislain apologizes for the long wait, then asks Ghislain how Rachel is, and the big man startles. Ghislain goes quiet, then says he never thought he would see the day she could walk again. Ghislain looms beside him in full armor and says it is all thanks to the young lord. Ghislain smiles to himself and says he is glad to hear it. Ghislain gathers Belinda, Ghislain, and Kaor close and says he has serious news. He tells them straight that their land is in real danger right now. The whole crew freezes, Ghislain, Kaor, and the rest staring back in shock. Around a war table, Ghislain lays out the full story of the day Elena was attacked. He recounts how he stopped the killers from murdering Elena to spark an all-out war. He tells them how he found the Degard young lord's corpse in the aftermath. Shadowy figures with glowing eyes already watch Perdium, he warns, surveilling the camp right now. He adds they have been active for ages, and Perdium lacks the time and means to brace for a strike. Kaor leans back, says he finally gets the rush, and jokes this land never lets him get bored. Ghislain nods that now is the perfect time to strike Perdium, a poor, weak land sitting on a priceless runestone mine. Ghislain agrees flat out, warning that the enemy simply will not leave them alone. Belinda snaps he should have said so sooner and wants to warn the vassals, but Ghislain says not yet. Since Elena's own guards turned on them, traitors could hide among the vassals too, so this stays with the crew. Ghislain says Elena living bought them breathing room, but finding the mine means the enemy will not wait. A hard grin crosses his face as he admits this one will be a brutal fight. The four of them sit around the table in heavy quiet for a moment. Kaor speaks up first and tells Ghislain to just give the orders from now on. He reaches out his clawed gauntlet and admits that sticking with Ghislain has been a blast. Ghislain swears he already gave his life to Ghislain and will fight beside him to the very end. Belinda throws up her fists and declares that nobody else will protect him but her. Ghislain lets a quiet, grateful smile tug at the corner of his mouth. The biggest threat to Perdium is the Delphine ducal family, working from the shadows. Under them stand Count Desmond and Amelia, taking their orders, and Ghislain vows to ruin their plan. Eyes hard, Ghislain announces the crew will now head for the Flame Magic Tower. Kaor cheers about finally selling the stones, then asks why not the closer Crimson Tower that pays more. Ghislain answers the Flame Tower will stir less friction, and Kaor echoes the word back, puzzled. Ghislain nods that a cart full of runestone always draws raiders, so staying a step ahead just makes sense. Belinda warns of an ambush like before, but though Crimson rose and Flame fell, Ghislain still picks Flame. The real reason lands on his face. He is going there because of her. The Flame Magic Tower rises into the sky, a huge clockwork spire over the city. Deep in its great library, a dark-haired woman sits alone among towering stacks of books. Clutching her staff, she asks a Professor Renato when the light he promised will come, never knowing that light is already riding her way.